for that we have this opportunity for the kickoff of our site-specific plan amendment process. And I think we have 3 cases we'll be listening to tonight. It's a great chance for the public to hear what is being proposed by the applicants. It is the beginning of a process. No decisions have been made, and I'm looking forward to the discussion tonight. And I want to thank all the people that have already reached out to my office. Thank you, Aaron.
Thank you. All right. So just want to reiterate that the purpose of tonight's meeting is we're going to do some presentations about the site-specific plan amendment process and comprehensive planning in Fairfax County, and no decisions are being made tonight. So the agenda, well, first of all, I'd like to introduce some of my colleagues, Graham Owen, Heather Springs, and Clara Johnson from the Department of Planning and Development, and I'm Aaron Kleibanner. And I'll be presenting the introduction to comprehensive planning and the overview of the SSPA process. And then we will, each staff member, my colleague Heather, will start off with a short presentation about the Drainsville nomination. And then her nominators may or may not make a presentation. I believe they have submitted slides. And then after that, we will open it up to questions, and we'll follow that same order with the next 2 nominations in the Sully district. Again, I'll make a short presentation on each one of them, turn it over to the nominators for their presentation, and then we'll open it up to questions.
Aaron, this is Clara from
Hi, Clara.
I wanted to acknowledge that Supervisor Bierman is also here. Since we haven't, I don't know if he had any remarks he wanted to make, but wanted to acknowledge that he's here as well.
I also can't turn on my video, but this is Jimmy Bierman from the Drainsville district. I'll echo what Kathy, what Vice Chair Smith just said. This is all the very, very beginning of this process, but interesting ideas are out there. So thank you for being here tonight, and we appreciate your participation in the start of the site-specific plan amendment process. Thank you.
Thank you, Supervisor Bierman. All right, so before I dive into what the site-specific plan amendment process is, I wanted to ensure our focus is on long-range comprehensive planning. And most of you are familiar with the comprehensive plan, but for those who might not be, the comprehensive plan is the county's primary policy document about the built and natural environment, and is used. Could you please mute your microphones, please? Thank you. And is used to guide the uses of the county's land and natural resources over the next 20 or so years. It is a guide for decision-making that reflects the community's vision and goals. It is important to note that the comprehensive plan provides recommendations. It is not the law like the zoning ordinance. However, the recommendations within the comprehensive plan are used by the Board of Supervisors, the Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals, county staff, and the community as a common basis for decision-making on land use and zoning applications. The comprehensive plan is a living document, and changes to it are called plan amendments. So to provide a sense of where this project is in terms of the development process, this diagram illustrates the life cycle nature of land development in the county. First, starting with a concept phase, which would be the site-specific plan amendment nomination. And then once the nomination is adopted into the work program, the plan amendment moves to the planning stage, where we look at impact analyses and plan recommendations. The next stage, the applicant would submit a rezoning application to initiate the zoning entitlement process. So the comprehensive plan in Fairfax County is divided into 3 basic parts. The first part is the policy plan volume, which provides countywide policies and objectives on 11 broad topics such as land use, transportation, the environment, public facilities, housing, economic development, and others. The second part of the plan are the area plan volumes, which divides the county into 4 geographic areas and contains elements intended to implement the policy plan at a more detailed level. The area plans are further broken down into planning districts and community planning sectors for specific areas and other places around the county. And within these districts and sectors are in many cases site-specific recommendations. The third element of the comprehensive plan are a series of maps, such as the comprehensive planned land use map, transportation plan map, trails plan map, and bicycle network map. One of the most important elements of the comprehensive plan is the map shown on this slide, which is called the Concept for Future Development. And this is the overarching guide for the area plans. The concept's policy direction in the area plans, which is illustrated in the map, is for almost all future growth and development to occur within designated mixed-use centers. There are a number of land classifications shown on this map that embody different types of mixed-use centers. These are including transit station areas, suburban centers, and we'll talk about a couple of those tonight. The transit station areas are shown in beige, and the suburban centers are shown in purple. So, and the areas outside of the mixed-use centers, such as the yellow suburban neighborhood classification, are areas where little to no change is planned, and this map will be referenced later in portions of the presentation. So there are a variety of common terms used in the comprehensive plan. 2 of the most common are density and intensity. These are terms that refer to the quantity of development and will be used in our later discussion on the nominations. Residential density is most often measured in dwelling units per acre. Fewer dwelling units per acre is a less dense development. For example, a single-family detached dwelling is often located in a 1 to 2 or 3 to 4 dwelling unit acre category and is considered low-density development. Townhouses are often at higher densities, and multifamily is often at a higher density of 12 or more dwelling units per acre. This slide depicts various types of housing and the densities they are associated with. Non-residential intensity is often measured as floor area ratio, which is obtained by dividing the floor area of the building by the land it sits on. Mixed-use communities containing both residential and non-residential uses are also identified by a maximum FAR. Similar to density, the lower the number, the less intense the development. For example, development in a metro station might have a planned FAR of 1.0 or higher. This equates to a total building size that is equal to the size of the parcel and could take a variety of forms. For example, this diagram is showing a 2-story building covering half the parcel or a 4-story building covering a quarter of the parcel, etc. In a nutshell, a higher FAR is indicative of a larger scale development. So as I noted earlier, the plan is a guide, not the law, and provides recommendations about land use, transportation, environment, and other topics generally. The plan is implemented through zoning, which is the law, and where more specific standards can be found, such as regulations for setbacks, open space, building height, and explicit uses. Changes to the zoning map are requested through the redevelopment process, and during this process, proposals are evaluated for conformance with the recommendations in the comprehensive plan. Because of this, it is very important that the comprehensive plan, as the guiding document, set forth the community's vision for the future to provide clear guidance about the character of future growth. As mentioned previously, the comprehensive plan is a living document, and proposed changes to it are called amendments. The planning department has a list known as the Comprehensive Plan Work Program of proposed amendments and studies that staff is assigned to work on as directed and adopted by the Board of Supervisors. There are 4 types of amendments, all of which are listed on the work program. Countywide policy plan amendments, such as the for sale workforce dwelling unit policy and program recently adopted, deal with changes to the policy plan. Others deal with different geographies at an area-wide level, such as the Centerville study. And then there are amendments at the site-specific level, which can be proposed through the cyclical SSPA process or separately authorized directly by the Board of Supervisors. The county SSPA process provides an opportunity for the public to propose a land use change or nomination to the comprehensive plan for a single site or a collection of parcels. The goal of SSPA is to provide the community with an active role in shaping the long-term vision of Fairfax County. Prior to SSPA, many of you may be familiar with the area plans review process, which was a similar type of site-specific review. SSPA involves the review of proposals called nominations, which request changes to the comprehensive plan, again, for individual sites. Anyone can nominate a site for consideration, and the proposals are evaluated at the earliest stage in what is called screening, which is what we are beginning now. The purpose of screening is to consider the nominations that have been submitted for high-level policy considerations and to determine whether they should be formally evaluated on the work program. I would like to emphasize that this is the very, very beginning of the development process. The nominations that are added to the work program would be evaluated in detail as plan amendments. Either following or concurrent with the formal study, an application could be filed to also rezone the property. Following these approvals are the submission of a formal site plan and then construction. These are all potential stages in the development process for sites that have been submitted for SSPA, but may not apply in all cases. A total of 53 nominations were submitted in the 2025 SSPA cycle, but the Board of Supervisors only moved 43 forward to the screening phase. This slide shows the geographic distribution across the county of the nominations. So in a nutshell, screening is intended to determine priorities among the nominations and which should be studied further. As a result, the feedback that would be most helpful at this stage is illustrated on the left side of the screen. As you consider the nominations, ask yourself, what are your preliminary thoughts about the proposal? What community considerations should be considered if the proposal is formally evaluated? And are there significant concerns or opportunities in evaluating the proposal? More detailed questions, such as what are the impacts of the proposed changes, would be answered during the later stages of the process. So here's our anticipated timeline. As mentioned previously, the nomination period took place from January 13th to February 13th of this year. This year, nominators were able to submit through the Planning and Land Use System, or PLUS system, through an online submission form. The Board of Supervisors accepted, again, 43 of the nominations through an action item into the screening phase, which begins with community meetings such as tonight's, and these will be running through mid-April. For those of you in attendance for the United Community of Faith Methodist Church nomination, tonight will be the only SSPA screening community meeting, but if that nomination moves forward to the work program stage, there will be many, many more community meetings that we would hold. So after the community meetings in May to early June, the Planning Commission will hold 3 workshops, which are open to the public, at which they will evaluate each nomination and develop recommendations to go forward to the board about which nominations should be added to the comprehensive plan work program as formal plan amendments. In mid to late June, the Board of Supervisors will adopt the formal comprehensive plan work program for 2025, again, through an action item. So here are the workshop dates. Again, the feedback received in the community meetings will be summarized for the Planning Commission to inform their discussions about community interests and considerations, and the public is invited to participate in the workshops. So if a nomination passes screening, it will be added to the work program for further review, and the board will prioritize the review of the proposal and public engagement for each nomination or plan amendment. If a nomination does not pass screening, the nomination is removed from consideration for this cycle of SSPA and is not added to the plan amendment work program. Properties subject to the nomination could potentially be redeveloped under its existing comprehensive plan recommendation and prior development approvals. Resubmission in a future cycle for the same property is possible. However, nominators will need to demonstrate a change in the proposal or a sufficient justification for reconsideration. So again, just to reiterate, the purpose of screening is to provide, general information on the SSPA process and the proposed nominations, to decide whether the nominations should become formal plan amendment studies that go forward to the work program. It is not to perform detailed analysis at this point with any of our partner agencies. It's not to evaluate detailed issues, and no decisions or on adoption of a plan amendment or approval of a rezoning will be made on the nominations during this part of the process. So before we go on to the nominations, I would just like to open it up for questions now. If anybody has questions about the process. I would like to highlight that at the bottom of your screen, you should have a button that says raise hand, or you might have an older version of Zoom that says reactions. If you go to that button, you'll see raise hand under that. So if you raise your hand, we'll try to answer your questions in order. And if you're not comfortable with asking your question verbally, if you could put it in the chat box and a staff member will respond to your question there. So are there any questions about what I've presented so far?
Sorry to ask an administrative question, but the current chat only allows us to direct message either you, Mr. Clevener, Graham Owen, or Heather Springs.
Yes. So
Okay,
those are the
great.
staff members that would answer your question in the chat.
Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Are there any
Okay.
questions that you would expect us to ask or from other meetings that are typical?
That I would expect you to, if you're confused about any of the what is comprehensive planning, what's the difference between planning and zoning, what's going to happen in the SSPA process, anything that I presented so far. And if not, we'll just move on to the nominations.
Yeah, Aaron, sorry, I've got a question. If we are on this call because we sent a note to Kathy Smith, will we be notified of the decision of the screening? Like, will it go forward? Will we get an email or a letter that tells us the next step for whatever it is we're here to hear?
So you'll be able to find all that information on the SSPA website. That'll be, but we'll also send out, I don't know if any of you are subscribed to the county listservs. That's another way to find out. And that would be basically you sign up on there under comprehensive planning and you will get emails if you're signed up on that. We also update our Facebook land use page. But I mean, we will make sure you can email any of us directly.
How about if you know you're already against what you're proposing? Should I register that now or should I wait?
Yeah, there'll be time again after each of the nomination presentations for questions about each of the specific nominations. And
Okay,
yes,
I'll be ready
yes.
for you.
Okay.
Aaron,
Yes.
how come the Community of Faith only has one SSPA?
They've only submitted one nomination.
Okay, I
Yeah.
didn't understand that. Thank you.
Uh-huh.
Aaron, this is David. Is it possible for one of these three nominations to not go past this screening portion of the process, or is this purely a Q&A part of the process, and these three are still going beyond into the next stage regardless of what is surfaced or what is discussed tonight?
So tonight is open for the community's input. There won't be any decisions made tonight. As I mentioned, the next stage of screening will be the Planning Commission workshops. They will hold, and those are open to the public as well. We'll review all of the input that we get tonight during those workshops. And then the planning commissioners will have discussions, amongst themselves, and then they will make a recommendation to the board about which of the nominations should go to the next stage, which is the work program. So going out of screening into the work program stage. So the board makes that final decision.
Yeah, thanks.
Mm-hmm.
Aaron, one more question about that COF nomination.
Uh-huh.
When you say it's only been nominated once, that was during that February time period.
Correct.
So the opportunities that are having multiple meetings, they've been nominated multiple times.
Okay, so if the Community of Faith Church nomination goes on to the next phase of the work program phase, that's when it becomes a formal plan amendment study. That's when the board, will give it a priority in terms of when we should work on it. And that's when staff will do detailed analysis on it now. And now it's a plan amendment when it gets to that stage. It's not a nomination anymore. It's a formal plan amendment study. And we do detailed analyses. We send a request out to all our partner agencies, transportation, schools, environmental review, et cetera. And they basically perform what we call an impact analysis, and they'll give us back numbers. So for transportation, the number of vehicle trips, that the proposal would create, the number of school students, what are the important environmental resources on the property, on the subject property, et cetera, how much parkland, urban parkland, or whatever parkland might be, what would the need for that be generated, and how much. So we'll get all of that back, and then we'll review that with the community at several community meetings. We'll have, and during the plan amendment process, basically we structure the public involvement process to have as many community meetings as we feel we need to have. So that's how that works.
So Aaron, the etc. means you will involve the community, which the church hasn't done yet.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
May I ask a question?
Yes.
When we get to the case that I'm interested in the chat, can I just make a comment about how I feel about this, or is that not the place for it?
That's just fine. Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I have a question as well. So as far as voicing our opposition to that, or to this Methodist Church build program,
yes,
when do we make that official? There was already a petition that went out. We've called our representative. How do we keep voicing our opposition to this project?
In the same way you have been, and at any future meetings that we might hold.
Okay.
You get there's opposition to that, right?
Oh, yes.
Good.
I've received many of your emails, yes, and I've seen the petition, etc. So yes, thank you. Susanna? Susanna, are you there? I see your hand raised.
Yep, sorry, I was having trouble with mute, and apparently I've turned my camera on. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, sorry about that.
Go ahead.
You mentioned that it might go into a subsequent phase and more hearings. On average, how long does the process take? Like the fact that this is the first meeting on the Methodist Church, if you were to approve it, which I think it's clear most of us on the phone hope that you do not, are we talking about something that's 2 years out or 6 months out?
So generally the way we explain this to people is that it really depends on how complex the issues are with a particular plan amendment. It could be anywhere from 6 months to more than a year. It really depends. But again, that's only going to be the case if this gets to the work program phase. Right now, we're in screening.
Okay. And Aaron, I would just add a little bit to that, to the question. I'm Graham with the Department of Planning and Development. I work with Aaron and Heather as well. But to your question specifically, this stage, what we're in right now, screening, where we're just trying to figure out whether something should advance for formal review or not. This part of the process will conclude in June. But what Aaron was describing in terms of that formal impact analysis, where we're looking at a plan amendment, studying whether or not a change to the comprehensive plan should take place or not, that's the part that generally takes anywhere from 6 to 9 months. So this is all in advance of, if there were to be a development application, that's most likely going to be another year at least. So in terms of kind of a formal approval, quote unquote, if there's an approval of any of these, it would most likely take place 18 to 24 months into the future in terms of a future zoning application. So there's a lot of steps along the way as we've kind of gotten into in terms of the process. But this part of it, where we're just trying to answer a question of which ones of the 43 that we're looking at should advance for formal review, this part of it will conclude in June.
Yeah, and that's hello.
Yep, go ahead.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask. If this is supposedly the first meeting regarding the church,
yes,
I believe that we received notification that it had been approved for something. Was it approved so that it would be on the agenda? Is that what that was originally?
It's just been accepted into the process so that we can have these kinds of conversations.
Okay, so this is the first meeting. This is nighttime. All of us work. We have kids. How many of these meetings are we going to have to go to? And do you just wear us out eventually so that there's no one opposing something anymore? How many of these meetings is the public going to have to attend if you decide from this meeting, even though many are opposed to this, you've seen the petitions. If this continues on, how long do we go on and on and on for this?
Sure, it's a good question. So this is the first meeting on all three of these nominations. So I just wanted to make sure that everyone knows we're here to discuss three: one at Arrowbrook, one on Route 50, and as well as the Methodist Church proposal. So this is the first. If there are future meetings, after the screening phase is concluded for any of these nominations, there will be several additional nominations to make sure that anybody that's in the community that's interested in the proposals is aware of the impacts, is aware of the proposals, and understands kind of the process. And also so we can gather more feedback. So obviously we have 291 people on this call, so we're very, cognizant that that a number of these proposals are generating a lot of interest. And so we take that into consideration. But the goal isn't to wear people out. You know, we want to make sure that we're hearing from people. So,
oh, no, we're prepared for a legal challenge. Don't worry about that. You're not going to wear us out.
Yeah, so no need to interrupt. We do have other people that have been raising their hands and are being very
Yeah, I
polite.
just
So
want to make sure.
Yeah, so did want to make sure that there are a lot of people on this call, so we are going to get through the hands, but I think everybody is interested in hearing about the nominations. So unless you have, kind of a burning question that everybody needs to hear, feel free to just send us a question in the chat if you have additional process questions, but we're happy to answer them.
Okay, well, what I'd like to do now is to move on to the nominations, and so we do have a limited amount of time tonight. So so with that, so again, we have 3 that we're going to be talking about tonight. One in Drainsville, that's the Arrowbrook Center, and then the 2 in the Sully district, Raising Cane's and the church. And this map on the left side of the screen is just showing the general locations of those. Okay, so I'm going to turn it over to my colleague Heather Springs now to talk about the Arrowbrook nomination.
Thanks, Aaron. Good evening, everyone. So I want to present to you guys nomination Drainsville 3, also known as Arrowbrook Center. This is a 1.8 acre portion of the larger 53 acre Arrowbrook Center development. Arrowbrook Center is in the Innovation Metro Center TSA or transit station area south of the Dulles Toll Road. The nomination is located west of Centerville Road, north of Sunrise Valley Drive, and within Land Unit A of the Dulles Suburban Center Comprehensive Plan. The subject site falls between the quarter-mile and the half-mile radius of the metro platform and is currently planned for a mix of residential and non-residential uses between a 1 and a 2 FAR. Aaron, you can go to the next slide if you don't mind. This concept plan was submitted with the nomination packet. It is meant to be a visual aid to the text description of the nomination contained within the statement of justification. The 53 acre Arrowbrook Center development currently contains an existing 49 townhomes, 108 stacked townhomes, 402 condos and apartments, and approximately 38,000 square feet of ground floor retail. The zoning approval allows for an additional 250 hotel units, 345 multifamily residential units, 686,000 square feet of office space, and approximately 12,500 square feet of ground floor retail. The nomination to the comprehensive plan proposes an option that would allow for a predominance of residential development and would eliminate the percentages in guiding the mix of residential and non-residential uses for the future development. This change to the comprehensive plan guidance would allow for a change in the zoning approvals to remove 250,000 square feet of office space and 3,500 square foot of retail, and would allow 132 multifamily units to be developed. I'll now pass it over to John McGranahan. He's a representative for the nominators, and he'll provide a brief presentation.
Thank you so much, Heather. And it looks like the cameras are disabled, which is probably a good thing for all the people on the line. They don't have to see me talk. But thank you all for hosting this meeting tonight. And I will try to be brief because I know you have a packed agenda here. If you would just advance to the next slide, I want to provide a little more background on what the nominator is requesting here. So this shows you the original 53 acres that were approved as part of the Arrowbrook Center mixed-use development. It was rezoned back in 2005 to the PDC district, and there were 7 land bays. And what you see on the screen to the far right of the screen is what Land Bay A, and that's the one that we'll be talking about. And it's the only undeveloped one at Arrowbrook today. Just to the right of those buildings that are shown on the approved plan is the Dulles Toll Road. So Arrowbrook extends to the left of your screen, kind of working from right to left. But it was actually developed in the opposite direction, from the left to the right, with a couple of parks that I want to point out if you'll go to the next slide. So these parks were delivered up front, and any of you who've been in the area are familiar with these. There is to the far south the 12-acre wetland passive park, and then the active recreation park, 6 acres there that you see with the turf field. These were all built up front, if you will, as part of the Arrowbrook Center development by the applicant. And I know I saw earlier that Jeff Fairfield, the manager of Arrowbrook Center, is on this call, but he's been involved with this since before any of this was approved. But the community it started with the parks, which is opposite of how these things usually develop, and then it developed and evolved moving south to north toward the toll road. Last point I would make on this slide is at the very bottom. In the spring of 2002, and Arrowbrook Center advanced more than $1 million, if you will, underwrote more than $1 million to construct the Innovation Trail that runs from this Land Bay A that we're talking about to the Innovation Metro station. So these amenities were put in up front, which I think is worth noting. Next slide, please. This sort of zooms in, if you will, to Land Bay A. So again, the Dulles Toll Road is right along the top of your screen, just beyond those trees. And these are the current approved uses in Land Bay A. And again, this is the only one that hasn't been developed. Next slide, please. Highlighted in the green box is what we're talking about. It's currently approved for an office use, and that's the one that the applicant is seeking to or proposing or nominating that the comprehensive plan include a change that would allow that to be converted from an office building to a residential building. Next slide, please. This is a graphic depiction, if you will, of what's approved on the left-hand side and what's proposed on the right. And you'll see that there is the only one change. If you go to the next slide, these are the proposed uses or the approved uses: office at the top, residential in the middle, and then hotel, office at the bottom. Next slide. And then on this side, on the right-hand side, you see what is proposed. So residential, hotel, office all match up. And it's just that one land bay, approximately 1.8 acres at the top, that is being proposed for an option to convert it from office to residential. Last point I would make on this slide is, as you look at the mix of uses down kind of in the bottom portion of the slide, both currently approved and being maintained, or hotel, office. The applicant has not received any expressions of interest, I'll say, for an office use in the current location at the top of the slide on the left. But there has been some interest in doing some kind of non-residential commercial uses along the bottom where you see hotel, office on the right-hand side. That's the Dulles access roads to the right of that, and Centerville roads to the bottom of that. And those, so there has been an expression of interest for non-residential uses there. And that's why we think giving the flexibility at the top both makes sense. It responds to the current market and what the nominator has experienced, people expressing interest in developing this last land bay of Arrowbrook. Next slide, please. I won't get too technical this evening, but I do want to highlight the challenge of what the current comprehensive plan language points out. So when you see this circled in yellow is the site that we're talking about. The blue color is either approved or built as residential. The orange color is what is approved for non-residential currently. And you'll see the tier 2 and tier 3, tier 1, tier 2, and tier 3. Tier 1 is a quarter-mile radius around the metro station. Tier 2 is the half-mile. So the property we're talking about is within that half-mile. And then tier 3 is beyond the half-mile. And the current comprehensive plan speaks to both densities, or intensity, and Aaron did a nice job of explaining that at the beginning of this meeting. But it speaks to the intensity of the uses, but it also speaks to the mix of uses to make sure that it's not all residential or all office. But the current language is what has presented an issue with this applicant applying for a zoning change that would allow this office to be converted to residential. Next slide, please. Just some quick numbers, and this is what we anticipate we'll be talking and discussing through with staff. But if you look at the circled items on this chart, the currently approved Arrowbrook, when that's added to everything else that you saw on that previous slide that's within Tier 2, you have 56% of the uses are residential. And sliding over to the right, 44% of those uses currently, with Arrowbrook is currently approved, 44% are non-residential. And the current plan language says should have predominantly residential is the word that's used. We're showing it as 50% or more. It's the word predominantly, I would think, would actually mean a lot more than 50%. But at that second circle on the right, the comprehensive plan calls for up to 40%. So as with the current plan language, we're at 44%, which actually exceeds what the plan language calls for. If you drop down to the next set of circles, this is with this nomination, if it does go forward and ultimately gets approved, and this office to then be, through a zoning change, changed to residential, then the residential uses would make up 59% instead of 56% of the uses in Tier 2, and the non-residential would drop down from 44% to 41%. So I apologize for being technical, but that's really why we're here and what we need to work through with staff, the Planning Commission, and the board should this go forward. Last slide, please. And these are just some images that the applicant had prepared for massing to see what could fit and what it would look like. Obviously, this is very preliminary. It's plan amendment and it's technical discussion about mixes of uses. But should this go forward, you can see from here the blocks that are in closest to you on the screen would be the residential use. The details, and this sort of follows on to what Aaron explained well at the beginning. Should this plan amendment go through screening and be part of the work plan and get approved, there would have to be a proffer amendment, which is essentially a zoning change to convert this from the current office approval to a residential use. And that's where the details like architecture, transportation, open space, all of those things would be addressed at the zoning stage, not at the plan stage. But this is something that we would have to do at the threshold to proceed forward. I'll wrap up by saying the applicant is doing this to respond to the market, but converting this to residential would have three big benefits. One is it would increase the amount of residential use which would advance the county's affordable housing objectives. Secondly, in this location, you would be increasing the number of residential units within walking distance of an existing metro station. So that would increase the metro ridership at this innovation station. And finally, the county, for economic development reasons, is supporting and promoting, doing a great job of it, affordable housing. And so this would, if this were converted to a residential use, it would advance the county's strategic planning objectives, the One Fairfax objectives, and the housing policies, all of which are very important and a focus point for the county. So we think this is a win-win if it is allowed to go forward, and be happy to answer any. The next slide is just questions. Happy to answer any questions that anyone may have this evening. Thank you again.
Thank you, John. So we'll go ahead and open it up. I see a couple people have their hands raised, so I'll start with who started at the beginning. So Marcelin, you had your hand up first. Do you have a question for us?
I do, and it's actually related to all these proposals. My question is, when you submit these impact assessments, what is the frequency where those are actually adopted and turned into projects?
Heather, I don't know that one's directed at me. You all are probably better positioned to answer that.
That is to our hosts, correct?
Okay.
Yeah.
Graham or Clara, do you guys want to jump in on an answer to that?
Sure, I can begin, and I'm sorry, since I'm not a co-host, I'm Clara Johnson. I work with Heather, Graham, and Aaron. I'm not able to turn my camera on either. I would say that these ideas drop off in different ways. It's not, they usually don't make it to public hearing where then the planning commission and the board of supervisors, I mean, that can happen, it has happened, but if staff is evaluating this, impact analysis happens and we're just not able to resolve issues, a more typical way that these go away is that they just kind of die on the vine. Graham, I don't know if you have a different assessment of it based on your experience. They often don't make it to public hearing is what I would say. If they're just not successfully meeting or able to address the concerns raised during a plan amendment study.
No, I would agree with you, Clara. I mean, some of them do advance. So I wouldn't say that, all of them die on the vine. Some of them do advance for formal review and become plan amendments and then are subsequently the subject of development applications. But I think, frankly, probably the majority don't make it. And there's various reasons, as Claire was mentioning, that sometimes the impacts are too great and we need to look at a different future for a site from a recommendation standpoint. Sometimes it's a question of property owners changing and they just have different priorities. So there's various ways in which amendments may go a different path beyond just formal adoption. But it's definitely, I don't want to leave anybody with the impression that if something is passed through screening, that it becomes a plan amendment, it gets redeveloped. That's not necessarily the case at all, actually.
Thank you. And as you could hear, my dog was grateful that you responded as well. So thank you.
Certainly.
Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Clara. I think we had Eric with his hand up next.
Yeah, thank you. Good evening, everyone. So this is a question to Mr. McGran. If I'm to understand that currently allotted for office space would be converted to residential, and that would be classed the same as Ovation at Arrowbrook, meaning it would be affordable housing. Am I correct in that question?
No, that's a very good question. I appreciate you asking it, but because that is not the case. With Arrowbrook, we're not seeking to increase the number of units that are currently approved for Arrowbrook, and all of the units that are required by the proffers and county policies for affordable housing are actually located in Ovation. So this building would not be required. Now, this is under the current proffers or conditions that apply to Arrowbrook. If we go through the rezoning process, there might be some additional conversations to be had, but it would not necessarily include any of the affordable units, by proffer, if that makes sense. It's kind of a complicated answer, but it would not be another Ovation. That's not what is contemplated or would be proposed or be required, if you will. Maybe that's the better way to answer it.
Okay, thanks. And then I just had one question and a comment. Also, not just the one that's being deliberated, but the actual other residential, which I think is like right. It's center right, not center right, but it's on the right in the middle on the area we're focusing on. Is that one planned to also be basically market rate apartments, or what is the status of that one too? It looks like a larger parcel too.
It is. It's approved for residential already. and those would be market rate units, apartments.
Thank you. And then lastly, I just want to say, as someone who lives here in the community and has for almost about 6 years now, I understand, trying to get more housing near metro stations, but we're already jam-packed as it is, and we kind of feel like ants living on top of each other. So I really don't think there should be any justification to put in even more residential and cram even more people on top of each other. That's just how I feel as someone who lives here. It might meet the county's goals, but it might not be convenient for the people who live here and have to live in the conditions as is being described simply to meet a goal. Over.
Yes. This is Donna Corain. Hello?
Yes.
Yeah. I'm looking at these units that are proposed, I believe 132, and exactly what Eric said. I mean, we're all ants now. We're being shoved in here. The traffic in Fairfax has become a nightmare. I cannot get a doctor appointment. I cannot get a dentist appointment without waiting months. You have not built the schools that meet the necessary for the housing that you're putting in here. You've not built the fire stations. You've not built the police stations. We don't have the hospitals. How many more of these projects can keep going in with 132 units, with 157 units, so on and so forth? I've been told that these are all in your planning stages, but you are putting the cart before the horse. And I think you need to stop until some other things are built that are the infrastructure to accommodate the community. We are ants living here. I can't even go 2 blocks without taking 20 minutes.
Well said.
Donna, if I may, let me respond to you, and this is sort of responding to Eric as well. So this, there are a number of points. This is a planning nomination, if you will, that would allow an application to be filed to make that conversion from office to residential. So all of the things you spoke about in terms of traffic, schools, and those types of impacts, architecture I mentioned earlier, they would be considered, and they would have to be addressed as part of a subsequent zoning change that would do the conversion, where you would get the studies and where the details and the impacts would be analyzed, and have to be, and frequently, not frequently, always, Fairfax County requires for applications for residential to make proffered commitments and contribution toward the public school system. So the school impacts would be addressed. The park impacts, like I said earlier, have already been addressed with the marquee parks that have been provided with this community. Traffic is always an important issue. And if the traffic can't be, the county will require the applicant to make sure that the traffic does not have an adverse impact on the surrounding road network. That's part of the zoning process. That's way ahead of us, if you will. And I'm not trying to just say, oh, don't worry about it, because you're correct to be concerned about it. That's what this process is for. The other thing I wanted to say to both Eric and to you and anybody in the community who's on the call is, if this plan amendment is accepted into the work program, we would have a community meeting with you all in person so that we could hear from you more than just on a Zoom meeting like this, and talk about these impacts in greater detail. So I don't want you all to leave here tonight thinking that we're not listening or we're not hearing, or that I'm just saying, don't worry about it.
Okay, I do want to say one thing. I realize what stage we're in right now, the very beginning, but I look around Fairfax and all of the projects you have that are built and are existing today went through this process, were in the same stage as they are now. And I do not see that whether you've studied it, you can study it to death. But the point is, you're saying, oh, well, this will have an impact, and then we'll all come together and we'll talk about it. And in the meantime, all these units are being built and nothing else is being done. I see grocery stores being built, which are, a company making money. But as far as Fairfax County fulfilling their duty for the infrastructure of the population that you have pushed into this county, you are not doing it. And all you're doing is telling us we're going to study it and then we'll all talk together. There are projects all over this county that are built right now, that have just been built. And I see no changes. I see more crowded schools. I see crowded hospitals. I see doctors, dentists you can't see for months.
Okay, everyone. I don't mean to cut you off, but we do have to move on to the next item. We do have 2 more items to talk about tonight. So I'm going to go ahead and close the discussion for Arrowbrook.
With respect, I'm calling on jumping in on behalf of the HOA board as part of Arrowbrook, and would request that at least one of our board members able to ask questions, as it has been a very major topic. And so with that said, I would be grateful. We do have 4 things that we'd be grateful for notice, especially because the current previous neighborhood builder has backed out on some of the promises that have been done. Number 1, the owners were promised much more parking than the builder has made good on, and there's been substantial concern that this proposal change will only add to this issue, especially as you know, the office cars for office space go away at night largely, and residents come in. So the squeezing of the balloon, so to speak, is better. I'll also opine that the graphic with the green parking in this neighborhood that we saw before is misleading, because that either showed park space or showed parking that is dedicated only for commercial and park spaces and not allowable for our owners and residents to park overnight. So my question with this is, how will the proposed rezoning mitigate our neighborhood's current substantial parking issues? Question 2, there's been safety issues with Ovation, has been mentioned specifically already, the affordable housing structure in the neighborhood's parking lot. So I didn't like hearing that an argument for this was to increase the affordable housing structure. We have issues with frequent racing, car races in the middle of the night, and have had violence to include a shooting. So question here is, how will this proposed rezoning be reviewed to prevent activity like this in the future? Issue number 3, there's another issue with speeding and running stop signs in this residential neighborhood. How will the proposed rezoning with even more residences than originally planned mitigate these concerns? And the final situation is that this proposal builds on property within the neighborhood. Construction is never clean, but what can we do, and how will the proposed rezoning, how are we able to ensure that the construction is done as cleanly as possible, especially as the previous builder has been sloppy about leaving nails and other construction materials in the roadways, causing numerous flat tires. Thank you for listening, and I look forward to responses.
Thanks. And for those that didn't get a chance, I encourage you to reach out to Heather, send her a comment or a message. I don't think we've received that many for Arrowbrook. It's not a voting, we just want to make sure we have this set of concerns. If there was something else that wasn't mentioned that you think we should be aware of, I encourage you to reach out to Heather and email her. And I think her contact information is heather.springs@fairfaxcounty.gov. Is that right, Heather?
Yes,
we'll have that at the end of the presentation too.
Some folks may not want to make it to the end. I know they were maybe here for Arrowbrook, so I wanted to make sure people got that. Or you can, yeah. Thank you. Thanks all.
And Aaron, just I know you want to move on, but if Mr. Chris could provide his contact information to Heather, we can work with Heather so that we can follow up with him, because I would like to explore more what he said.
Very good. Yeah. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Thank you, James.
Okay, so I'm sorry to cut people off, but we do have to keep moving here. So the first Sully District nomination is SU 037 Raising Canes. This is a 1.2 acre site. It includes a 6,000 square foot Bob Evans restaurant and surface parking. The nomination is located on Thunderbolt Place, west of Centerview Drive and north of Route 50, within Land Unit E1 of the Dulles Suburban Center. And that's shown on the inset map here at the left upper corner of the slide. The adopted plan is for campus-style office and industrial flex uses up to a 0.35 floor area ratio, with up to 20% of any building built could be ancillary retail use. And in addition, no freestanding retail use or shopping centers should be developed. The nomination proposes to remove the adopted plan recommendation that no freestanding retail use be developed on the subject property specifically and or for the entirety of Land Unit E1 to allow for a restaurant with drive-through uses. And this slide is just showing the concept plan that was submitted with the nomination package. This is, again, meant to be an illustration of what it could look like if it were developed at some point in the future. And again, it's a 3,100 square foot Raising Cane's restaurant with 2 drive-through lanes. And I'll turn it over to the nominator now for their presentation.
Well, Aaron, this is Bernie. Are you going to be driving the...
Yeah, I'll advance the slides for you,
Okay,
Bernie.
thank you. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for providing the time to describe this SSPA nomination to you. For those of you that don't know me, I'm Bernie Suchicito, a land use planner with the firm Wash Colucci. I'm also joined tonight with Bob Brands, an attorney with the firm as well. We're here tonight to represent Raising Cane's Restaurants, LLC, the nominator for this rather straightforward SSPA nomination. You can advance the next slide, please. Staff has already provided a solid summary of this nomination, so I will make my remarks rather brief. As some of you may already know, the site is home to a Bob Evans restaurant located within a strip of standalone commercial retail uses on the north side of Route 50, east of Route 28, and west of Centerview Drive. Next slide, please. The nomination site is about 1.6 acres in size, that is accessible by Thunderbolt Place, and is surrounded by several hotels and restaurants. Next slide. Excuse me. Here are some recent photos of the nomination site from the surrounding streets. As you can see from Route 50 in the upper left-hand side. The upper right-hand side is from Thunderbolt Place looking west, and then the bottom picture is from Thunderbolt Place looking towards the southeast. Next slide, please. Currently, the nomination site is split zoned between the C8 Highway Commercial District and the I5 General Industrial District. A restaurant use is permitted in both districts. However, a special exception application would be required to submit for such a use. Such an application does require a rigorous review, part of which involves how such a proposal is compared to the comprehensive plan's recommendations. Next slide. And that brings us to why we're here tonight. The comp plan recommends this land unit be developed as a campus-style office and or industrial flex use. And as you can see in the highlighted text before you, the plan discourages freestanding retail uses, which is the text that we are seeking to amend through this plan process. Next slide. The nominator's concept includes replacing the existing 6,100 square foot Bob Evans, who has indicated that they will not be renewing their lease at this site, with a much smaller 3,100 square foot Raising Cane's restaurant with a drive-through component. Just how the site currently functions today, access to the proposed restaurant will continue to be via Thunderbolt Place, with 2 existing curb cuts, which would mitigate impacts on Route 50. While there is currently an expansive buffer and significant landscaping located between the property line and Route 50, There may also be an opportunity to provide enhanced screening along Route 50 as well. Next slide, please. The proposed nomination would allow for the continuation of community serving uses on the site. The plan's current restriction on freestanding retail uses is not reflective of the existing uses on the nomination site and adjacent parcels along Thunderbolt Place. While the plan's current recommendation for campus-style office or industrial flex may be appropriate for areas in the northern and western portions of this land unit, the nominator notes that this site is not a viable location for such uses and that freestanding retail uses are the most appropriate option for this particular location. Such a use is also complementary to the existing office and hotel uses in the land unit, providing convenient dining and shopping options for employees, visitors, and hotel guests. Given that the existing historic use of the property and the adjacent parcels is freestanding retail, we believe that the proposed nomination is appropriate. That concludes my presentation, and I'm happy to respond to any questions you may have. Thank you.
Okay, I see Evan Rame.
Yes, Evan Ramey. I am personally not a fan of drive-through restaurants, mostly because they end up improving or harming the pedestrian and cyclist experience, and they can contribute to the urban heat island effect. I understand that this will be developed under the Fairfax County Parking Reimagined project, so there will be some additional landscaping requirements, but what else can be done to make this site an enjoyable and pleasant space to be for people that don't drive through it?
So that's a very good question, and pedestrian and bicycle safety has been at the forefront of everyone's minds for many applications for the last number of years. The site is currently served. Aaron, could you flip back to one of the aerial images, please? Couple more. That one, yes, thank you. As you can see in this image, the site is currently served by sidewalk along Thunderbolt Place and a trail along Route 50. It pretty much terminates at our western point, but it continues eastward towards the heart of Chantilly. There are opportunities to review potential options and opportunities to look at and enhance the existing pedestrian and bicycle facilities of the general area as part of a transportation impact analysis of this nomination. We'll look at what those impacts are and potential mitigation options and recommendations, and we'll go through that analysis and recommendations and see what can be done to improve the safety of pedestrians and bicycles within the general area of this property. But that will only be able to know that if we move forward with this nomination and provide and be able to conduct that more thorough transportation analysis.
Yes, and I imagine impervious surface and stormwater would also be part of this more formal review.
Yes, yes. As part of the intent is to submit a special exception concurrent with a rezoning application, and part of that is to usually it's an opportunity for the county and for the property owner developer to review the property and see what new updates can be provided within reason on the property. And that includes stormwater review and other environmental aspects, improvements to landscaping, and as well as pedestrian and bicycle facilities on site.
Excellent, thank you.
Ken
I will
Gordon.
also mention, as I mentioned earlier, the site currently has 6,100 square foot retail building, and the nomination, as it currently is proposed conceptually, is for a building that is about half the size. So there are opportunities to potentially daylight some of the hardscape surfaces.
Exciting, thank you.
Okay, Ken Gordon.
Hi, thank you. So it's a general question, I think applicable to all of the applications. And before I ask, just start with a general comment. I just want to thank all of the Fairfax County staff who are in this call tonight. It's a tough job, balancing multiple constituencies as evident by these questions. So just want to start by expressing my appreciation for everybody's hard work on this. So I'm asking a question. I don't typically get involved in Fairfax County issues, even though I've been a resident here in Franklin Farm for 24 years. But clearly there's some issues, and again, this applies to every topic tonight. There's some issues that have drawn up a lot of interest, as evidenced by the 300 people on the call. And I understand, just in terms of how we can express as a community kind of our thoughts about some of the proposals. I understand that this meeting is a first meeting in a long process, and that there are other meetings that are opportunities to express our thoughts. But in this meeting, of course, we have 300 people and limited time. Any subsequent meetings we will as well. And so finally, my question, what is the formal process for people to submit thoughts about a proposal into the county? I know there's a petition that's been submitted, but that's an unofficial thing that may or may not be considered. And so, like, what is the Fairfax County version of the Federal Register where there's an official set of public comments that are requested?
I will defer that to staff.
Yeah, Ken, I'm happy to answer your question. It's a good question. So there's a couple of ways. During screening, as Aaron and Heather and kind of the rest of our team have been preparing for these community meetings, the most effective way for us to receive the feedback just in advance of any decisions being made later down the line has been what a number of people have been doing on the Franklin Farm proposal in particular, which is emailing our project-specific web email address, which is dpdsspa@fairfaxcounty.gov. I will say that's to get to staff. There are also opportunities kind of in line with what you're describing of making sure that your comments are heard by the Planning Commission as well as the Board of Supervisors. And I raise that because the next step after this community meeting, which is just to gather feedback and to provide information, is there will be a series of Planning Commission workshops, which is another opportunity for people to provide their input to the decision makers. So the Planning Commission, for those of you all that are not familiar with it, is a body that has been delegated a lot of authority by the Board of Supervisors to provide recommendations on land use and planning and zoning. And so they provide a very important recommendation on which of the nominations should advance for further review or not. So we can drop the email address for the Planning Commission into the chat just so that everybody has it, as well as to the Board of Supervisors, because I think being able to send it to staff is great, and we read every email that we receive, but you also want to make sure that you're reaching to the decision makers. Staff, we just make recommendations ourselves. So there is one more thing, which is I'll also drop in the link, which is a website that we have that we've set up fairly recently called Public Input, and that is the survey. And so that'll give us a little bit more detailed information about what comments you might have on which nominations, and help us to kind of tease out a little bit more specific information from commenters. So we'll put all that into the chat because I know I just said a lot of things, but I just want to make sure that you're aware that we do read the comments that we receive, but we also want to make sure that you're able to get them to the right people, since the Fairfax County is a very big place.
Outstanding. Appreciate it very much. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay, are there any more questions on this nomination? All right, so we will move on to Community of Faith United Methodist Church. Very briefly, it's almost a 9-acre site. The adopted plan is for residential use at 1 to 2 dwelling units per acre, and this is within a suburban neighborhood. In the concept for future development, I mentioned that before. Basically, these neighborhoods contain a variety of residential styles and also neighborhoods serving retail uses, public facilities, parks, and institutional uses. The nomination is for, some other things I should mention. So this site also contains a cell tower, and then there are 2 easements on the site. Running along the west side of the site is a Colonial gas pipeline easement, and on the east side of the subject property is a Fairfax water easement. Um, and then the northern portion of the subject area is also bisected by stormwater pipes and channels that convey stormwater from Autumn Lane and Brynwood Court to a dry pond on the west side of the Fairfax County Parkway. And another thing to note is that the intersection of Fairfax County Parkway and Franklin Farm Road is planned for a grade separated interchange in the comprehensive plan. So the adopted comprehensive plan, again, I went over that. The nomination proposes an option for an affordable multifamily residential use at 16 to 20 dwelling units per acre with up to 157 units. Again, here's the concept plan that was included with the nomination package. This is just, again, an illustration of what it could look like. And now I'll turn it over to the nominator for their presentation.
Hi, good evening. My name is Evan Pritchard. I'm a land use attorney at Wire Gill, representing Community of Faith tonight. I'm happy to be with you all. Next slide, please. I'm joined tonight by Dr. Bob Cristiano. That's his picture on the left. My picture's on the right. We would like to have an important conversation with you about affordable housing. This is something that Fairfax County has identified as a crucial need in the community. And we're hoping, as has been said many, many times tonight, that this is a beginning of a conversation that we can have about a potential partnership with the church, with higher education, local business, government, and residents of Franklin Farm to address the housing crisis that we face. Next slide, please. This is not a problem that's unique to Fairfax County. Obviously, this is happening across the country. And when I say affordable housing, it's important to note that this would be affordable housing for folks like teachers, police officers, firefighters, nurses, emergency workers. As I'm sure many on the call know, it is not cheap to live in Northern Virginia. As of 2024, the average median income for a family of four in the area is over $154,000. So for a family of four, affordable housing would families with an income of up to nearly $93,000 per year would be eligible for this affordable housing that we're talking about. Next slide, please. So this idea for achieving more affordable housing in Fairfax County is embodied in the Fairfax County Policy Plan. Here's a couple of examples of that. In Policy Plan Housing Objective 1, there's a goal of achieving 12% affordable housing in the new mix of units in the coming years. And the second objective of the policy plan is to encourage affordable housing at all income levels in all parts of the county. Next slide, please. Efforts at the state level are happening in the Commonwealth. Just within the last 2 weeks, some legislation has been passed by the General Assembly that's awaiting the governor's signature that would encourage localities to adopt zoning and land use strategies to encourage affordable housing and work with communities of faith to realize more affordable housing on church-owned properties, among many others. Next slide, please. And turning to Community of Faith, as you see here, it's a small church with a big heart. It's been around since 1982. And a big focus of its outreach to the community has included a food pantry for the last 25 years. In 2024 alone, they fed approximately 50,000 people. The majority of people are working and living in Fairfax County, and these are the types of people in the community we're trying to reach out to with housing. We think we have a moral obligation to help improve the lives of folks like this and help our community thrive by keeping folks in the community who might otherwise be forced to move further out away from their job and their community to find affordable housing. Next slide, please. So in comes the Georgetown Affordable Housing Initiative and Sanctuary AP3, which is a 501c3 corporation that works to achieve affordable housing on land that is owned by churches. This is an effort that's spearheaded by Dr. Cristiano. He has he teaches grad students at Georgetown University, and under his leadership, his students have studied over 125 properties in 27 states and Canada. And most recently, the community faith property has been one of those. And it's their the product of this work that's the quick sketch there you see on the right that was submitted with our nomination that shows a potential, but by no means, the final proposed vision of what an affordable housing development on the property could look like. As Aaron mentioned, the proposal would allow for up to 157 units on 4 floors. That is by no means set in stone. Again, this is the beginning of the conversation. That is a number that was arrived at based on the student work. A lot goes into figuring out what that number would actually be should this application move forward, and should we go forward with a follow-on rezoning action. Next slide, please. So I think I had some more slides. Is that? Oh, maybe not. Anyway, that we know there are a ton of interested people here tonight. As the previous nominator said, we would be more than happy to engage in conversations. I know we haven't had a conversation with the Franklin Farm community yet. I was asked by the church leadership to explain the situation here. I only recently learned of this property, and it only recently was brought to the church's attention that a site-specific plan amendment would be necessary. We were in the beginning phases of talking about this property when it was recognized that the current comp plan recommendations wouldn't allow for affordable housing on this site. So, we apologize to the community that we did not have time to do a lot of outreach ahead of time before submitting the nomination.
Right, but you're here now.
You're
here now.
Yep, thank you. So anyway, that concludes my presentation. I'm happy to answer any questions. And as I mentioned, at this point, I'll hand it over briefly to Dr. Cristiano if he'd like to say a few words that sort of flesh out what I was talking about with AP3 and the work that's been done today with the Affordable Housing Initiative.
Sure, there's plenty of affordable housing in West Virginia. Where are you?
Thank you, Evan. This is Bob Cristiano. I'm a professor at Georgetown University. The affordable housing crisis in our country is
I'm sorry. Could I ask a question?
Why don't we let Mr.
Yeah, thank you all real quick. There are a number of people who have already raised their hands. And so what we'll do is we'll hear from the nominators and the presenters. There's no need to talk out of turn. So what we'll do is we'll go through the hands that have been raised. And I think we build this to end at 9 o'clock. We can stay on to answer questions though. So I just want to make sure people know there will be time to answer questions. So I would just encourage people to listen, and then we'll have a time for Q&A afterwards. Thank you.
Thank you. Just to continue the thought that Evan was sharing with you, my student completed their thesis in the beginning of January of this year, and it was presented to the church in January. Evan learned of this project about a week before the SSPA application was due on February 13th. So it was a crash and burn exercise to put together the application. I want to emphasize to the community that the students' exercise was a study. It wasn't a request for a building permit. It wasn't a request for entitlement. It wasn't a request for an approval. It was a study. It was a study to determine if this site had promise as a site for affordable housing in a community that desperately needs it, as is evidenced by the actions of the county and now the actions of the state. So like I said, it was a study intended to begin a conversation, not to begin construction of a project. So this is a big issue. The Georgetown Affordable Housing Initiative is the largest affordable housing program in the country. And as Evan said, we've completed studies in 27 states and Canada. So we recognize the scale of this crisis in our country. And that's the intent of this exercise. Thank you.
Okay.
Professor, where do you live?
Down the street in Arlington.
Down the street.
That's what I thought.
Please, I would encourage you all to raise your hand so that we can answer your questions in order. Please don't speak out of turn. We'll try to get to as many of you as we can, I promise. So I see Marcelin's iPhone first.
Thank you. Always takes a minute to unmute, so thank you for waiting. Gentlemen, thank you for making time tonight to communicate with us. I think one of the things that you may have already picked up on, and I'm sure we'll be hearing tonight, is communication has been a challenge. Certainly for me, one of the frustrations with not being too enticed with this project. And then the most recent communication we do have is a cease and desist letter regarding being able to review and comment on this thesis, because apparently we are violating intellectual property, which when I go through the Georgetown University website, there's nothing that actually indicates that. It kind of sounds like don't look at the internet. So glad to hear that somebody got their gold star for doing their homework, but if it was only done in January and you were rushing to meet a deadline, my question is, what is the urgency? Why not aim for next year, when you can apply the rigorous standards that I would expect from Georgetown for actually vetting the resource and researches? So additionally, going forward, my question is to our hosts, what are the expectations for transparency of communication on the nominator side? This meeting is being recorded by AI, as I understand. You've provided us some survey links, emails, which we really appreciate that transparency. But as the nominator continues to pursue this, what can we expect in good faith from them to understand where they're at in pursuing this project? Thank you.
So this is Evan. I just to answer the first part, I think that was directed at staff, the balance of the question, but just on the why not wait a year? The next nomination period would be a couple of years from now. That is certainly, would have been a possibility to wait a couple of years, but as we tried to lay out in the presentation, this is going to take a couple of years if this application goes forward, just to get to a place where we can submit a rezoning application. That would take another year. Then you're talking about a year of construction. Before you know it, it's probably 4 years before anything could potentially get built on this site. And so these things take some time. So it was important to us to file for this 2025 SSPA cycle. And I'll leave it to staff to respond to I think the question you were directing to them about our communication obligations moving forward. But I will reiterate that we do apologize that we didn't have time to meet with the community beforehand. But it's been said we now have a year or two long process ahead of us, and we will make ourselves fully available and be reaching out to the community to have more discussions like this.
Yeah, and to your question about just communication and transparency, that's one of the kind of hallmarks of our site-specific plan amendment process is that we allow anybody to participate, including at the nomination stage by putting proposals in, but then also by reviewing the nominations. We host on a regular basis, weekly basis, community meetings all across the county on similar kinds of proposals. So I just mentioned that we make sure that people are heard, as a part of this process. So we host virtual meetings. Sometimes we'll do in-person meetings if there's the right circumstances, and it seems like that's the right venue for getting feedback. But that's really a hallmark of this is we want to make sure that as we do planning in the county, that we're considering the views of people that live nearby that might otherwise be interested in the proposal. Because y'all know about your communities better than we do, and so we want to make sure that feedback is received because it is very valuable and useful as on the staff end as we craft recommendations, but then also as the planning commission makes their recommendations, and then of course as the board of supervisors makes ultimately decisions about planning and zoning. So in terms of what we can provide for you, we make sure everything's available on our website. I think Aaron included in the very beginning of the presentation a description of some of the ways that you can get involved in keeping up to date about planning projects. And so I would highly encourage people to go on our SSPA website, check it out, because we include all of the dates for community meetings, planning commission hearings, workshops, that sort of thing there. It's kind of a one-stop shop repository for information. So I did just want to mention that transparency and making sure that everybody has a good sense of what's going on is a big part of our process, and we take it very seriously. So that's part of why we're doing this. And it's always difficult to hear about something for the first time, but that's a big part of what we're trying to do today is make sure that we're hearing from the people that are in the community that would be interested in this proposal.
Thank you. And just to follow up, I appreciate that. And I am seeing a lot of transparency from you and your colleagues. My point is simply to those who nominated this, to the church, what can we actually expect for them in terms of frequent and transparent communication on what it is they're trying to do here?
Hey, Evan, do you want to answer that question?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, following tonight's meeting, I'll get with the leadership team, and we'll reach out. I understand that we've been contacted by a number of folks in the community. I presume we'll reach out to the president of the Franklin Farm Foundation as sort of the point person, but we'll be reaching out to talk about probably a series of meetings and where we can host that, presumably at the church, and what that kind of schedule can look like that will work for everybody's schedule in the community.
Okay, next I see Jack L.
Hey, I just wanted to ask what the approximate magnitude of the subsidies you're expecting to receive from public funds to make this low-income housing affordable is expected to be in terms of dollars per year. Thank you.
I deal more with the land use aspect of this. However, for affordable housing, there are a number of federal grants that are applied for, and there's some state dollars that are made available that would help the church make this affordable. But some of this would be this would be a partnership with the developer to actually build the project in an affordable way, and then the church or the owner of the church would enter into covenants with Fairfax County to keep the rents affordable. But aside from the tax benefits of that have been provided for affordable housing, Fairfax County would not be subsidizing this project.
Okay, next I see Evan again.
Yes, thank you. My name is Evan Ramey. I grew up in the Franklin Farm area on Rosemere Court since I was about 3. And according to actuarial tables, I have another 59 years left on this planet. And I can say with certainty that this is the kind of development that I believe will make this neighborhood better. I'm going to yap about it for a bit because I have heard that a lot of other people don't think the same way, but I just want to put my thoughts out here, put it on a platform for everyone to see. My parents actually, 43309 Rosemere Court, paid $290,000. This was a starter home for them, and it had let them build up equity. I went to the same school for all throughout my K through 12 education, and they were able to afford it as a single worker household. And that opportunity is just not available to me today. That very same home now has an estimate of like $588,000. And especially with the job market being the way that it is today, like home prices are consistently outpacing wage growth. And most like entry-level positions, you need 3 to 5 years of experience. I honestly don't know if I can continue to stay in my hometown without paying my parents' rent. I cannot. I don't have the same opportunities that they did. And so we just need to build more housing. There is a housing crisis. We can't afford not to address it. And there's also a climate crisis. And one of the best things that we can do to address the climate crisis is to build housing that will actually let people make green decisions by default. And this is a fantastic site to let people do that. We have the 924 bus that runs right into Herndon, which is a major job center, and it can bring you into DC on the Silver Line. There's the Giant right next door, which was so easy to walk to. I cannot tell you how many times I've walked to Giant to help my mom, get something that we need to finish the recipe. Having a neighborhood grocery store is a wonderful amenity. And I would hate to think that we would deprive these people of having the same opportunities that we did when we moved here. This is a fantastic neighborhood. It's incredible. I don't know if there will be growing pains. I don't know if the recent expansion to Oak Hill Elementary School can accept another, say, 30 or 60 kids. I don't know if the proposed grade-separated interchange would be a good fit for the community or any of this. But it can all be addressed later in the process, as none of these other things are a reason to just ignore it entirely. We can't just throw our hands up and say, housing is too hard, we're not going to build. We seriously have to consider this project. We have to let it develop. I hope to see everyone in the later meetings for this project. Thank you.
Thank you, David and Kellis. David?
There it is. Hey, sorry, trying to find the unmute. Hey, I'd like to let Larry Danforth, the president of the Franklin Farm Board of Trustees, speak before I do.
Okay. It's Larry on the call.
Am I on?
Yes, go ahead, Larry.
Yes, I am Larry Danforth, and I'm the president of the Franklin Farm Board of Trustees, monitoring this. Thanks much for the presentation. The board does take this pretty seriously. We have communicated as soon as we learned of the proposal through the news, by the way. And we communicated with Supervisor Smith as well as Chairman McKay some of our initial concerns with the proposal as we knew it, things like safety, compatibility. And if the staff for the planning staff doesn't have that information from the supervisor, then I made a note here to ensure that I send it on over to you on the planning staff so you can see all of those things, which, as I understand the presentation at the very beginning, is what are the parameters that you need to evaluate at the next step if this goes forward to that study step. We also took the opportunity to remind the church through our legal counsel of their presence in Franklin Farm and the fact that their property is controlled by the covenants that everyone who owns property in Franklin Farm has attached to their real estate records. So I'm pretty sure that all of those other folks who live in Franklin Farm, nearly 1,800 households, would expect that those covenants would be upheld. And we just reminded the church again that they needed to follow a process if it comes down to that juncture somewhere in the future, as I understand again, the initial presentation by you, Aaron. So we'll make sure that you understand what are some of our initial thoughts are and what should be included in the study. And we have also forwarded copies of those of the Declaration of Covenants that apply to everyone who lives in Franklin Farm. Back to Dave.
And I would just like to say at this point that just to remind everyone, the county's planning and zoning processes do not touch those private covenants. So this is a private matter that the county just doesn't get involved in. So all we will be dealing with if going forward again is the comprehensive plan, and if there are concurrent rezoning applications after that, but we don't touch covenants. That's a private matter.
So what would be the point of rezoning?
And that said, Larry, to your question and to your point, if you could forward those your comments that you sent to the supervisor's office to Aaron, that would be great, because while Aaron's correct, the comprehensive plan is dealing with 20 years out, the long range comprehensive plan for the entire county. So we don't get into the details about covenants and restrictions, that sort of thing that are privately held. We do want to know about them, and we've heard a lot from the community about the covenant question. And so I don't think that we're ignoring it. It's just that there's a time and a place for that. But it is good for us, as background information, that sort of thing. But in terms of the decision, which is whether this should be studied further or not, it's useful information, but it won't have bearing in terms of the weight that it might otherwise have for Franklin Farm, since it is a private covenant. So I just want to make sure that was clear for folks, because we have heard that question quite a bit.
And I understand that, and that's why I made a note to specifically wrote down Aaron's name to make sure that you guys got some of the top level concerns, such as traffic and safety, impacts that once again, as I understand Aaron's preliminary presentation, should be considered if this should go forward to a study point. So we want to make sure all of those are included in the study.
No, absolutely, and do forward it to us, because we will take a look at it and review it. So thank you, Larry.
Yep. Thank you, Larry. Yep. Next, I have Paul Cashy. I'm sorry.
Hey, Aaron, this is David Inglis. I did want to speak as well.
Oh, okay, Dave. Go ahead.
Thanks. Aaron, first of all, I just want to say thank you so much for working with us through this process. It's been enlightening, and I really do appreciate you answering my questions, of which I've had quite a few. My name is David Inglis. I'm a resident of Franklin Farm. I've been a resident for 8 years, and I live on Autumn Hill Lane, so I'm immediately adjacent to where the church is. And needless to say, we've delved into this quite a bit. Of course, it's been extremely disappointing that the church has led this to be their only communication with the neighborhood so far. So this is really the first time that they are hearing 299 participants saying this is a bad idea. But allow me to be one more of those folks saying that. So we don't deny the need for affordable housing in Fairfax County at all. We think it's important. We think it's a good thing. Obviously, we love living in Fairfax County. We think everybody who wants to live in Fairfax County should be able to live in Fairfax County. But that doesn't mean that it can or should be built right here. I know we just talked about the covenants, but I've been talking to Aaron and others about the covenants, and I'm going to reiterate that right now. It's my understanding that until recently, the church was not even aware that they had covenants on their deed. And judging by the speed at which this went through, my first question to Mr. Pritchard and to Dr. Bob, are you aware that the church's deed is encumbered by Franklin Farms protective covenants?
Yes, I did get the lawyer letter and have reviewed that and reviewed the covenants.
So is it the church's intention to comply with the covenants, including the covenant on architectural control?
Yes.
So the covenant for architectural control requires approval of the Franklin Farm Architectural Review Board prior to commencing the project. As you stated, you've been sent a letter saying that this will not receive approval. Apartment buildings are not harmonious with the existing structures of Franklin Farm and are detrimental to the values, which goes against the ARB standards and covenant. I suggest in the strongest of possible terms that the church withdraw its SSPA nomination and work to gain concurrence with the Franklin Farm Architectural Review Board prior to resubmitting their plans to the county. Continuing to press forward without ARB concurrence and approval is inviting significant costs to the church and developer for which they will see no return. Additionally, they're inviting lawsuits to be filed against the church for noncompliance with the architectural control section of the covenants. Our bylaws further state that in any action for breach of the governing documents, the Board of Trustees for Franklin Farm will be entitled to recover the cost of the proceedings and attorney's fees. This could be ruinous to the church. The proper course of action is to withdraw the nomination and gain consensus before moving forward. Thank you.
Okay, next I have Paul. Is it Kashchi? I apologize if I'm mispronouncing that.
Yeah, Aaron, thanks so much. So I guess the first question is, I've got a bunch of questions. Are our questions going to be answered? Because David just asked about a dozen of them, and not a single one of them was answered or addressed. So I want to understand if we have an audience that's going to provide a response, or are you just fielding questions?
Well, again, the questions about the covenants are something we can't answer.
Okay, that's fair. Okay. All right. So my questions, I've got many of them. Why did we not learn about this plan until it was in the press? So that's my first question to the attorneys and Dr. Bob.
As I mentioned and Dr. Bob reiterated, and I apologize that this came together so quickly. But as Dr. Bob indicated, I learned about this property, let alone the plans for this property, about a week before the SSPA submission deadline. And since these SSPA processes only roll around every couple of years, it was decided that we should file in 2025.
Okay, that's good. Thank you. When did the study of the property by
Paul, if I could answer the question for you, Paul?
No, Dr. Bob, because this one's for you. When did you begin your study of the properties with your Georgetown University program?
December.
So you started the study in December. So you fast-tracked. So what was the start date of the study of this project to when it was proposed to the community?
The project was worked on during this fall semester of last year, but to answer your earlier question, Paul, excuse me, to answer your earlier question, the pastor attempted to contact your association, did not get a response, and one of the trustees went to the association office before this hearing, and I don't know if it was before the article or not, but that was 4 attempts to reach the association that were not responded to. So it's not a fair statement that the church made no effort to reach Franklin Farm.
Okay, what are those specific dates that those attempts were made and through what types of communications?
As I said, one of the trustees went to the office more than one time, and the pastor called the office.
Okay, on what dates?
I don't have that information here. I have to talk to the pastor.
Well, I'm asking you. I mean, you're the one that's proposing this project. That's fine. So, Larry, if we could look into when that was actually done, because that's a big concern of mine. If our HOA did not respond to communication attempts by the church. In your write-up, you talked about the project being exclusive, and what was published in the press was an over 55 community. That's clearly not what's being presented tonight. So can you please talk to me about what was originally disclosed to the public to why it's now being presented as solely a low-income community versus an over 55 community?
Well, first of all, it's not being presented as a low-income community.
That's how it was opened this evening. It was opened as a low-income project.
That didn't come from me, so I don't know.
That's how this was presented by this panel and by this presentation. It was presented as a low-income project. So then
I did say that for a family of four with a household income of $92,820, it would be considered affordable under the the definition of affordable housing.
Okay, so it's an affordable housing project, not an over 55 and affordable housing project, correct?
Affordable housing is defined as an average median income of 60%. The rents are capped at an average median income of 60% of the AMI. So those rents would probably be $200, $300, $400 under. This would be a Class A apartment building. It would be $200 or $300 or $400 under the comparable rents of another brand new Class A apartment building. That's far from low income. Second thing, I've been building affordable housing, senior housing since 1984. Senior housing is age restricted to either 55 and up or 62 and up, depending on circumstances in the community and who is the lending partner. In the case of HUD, they have two programs. One is 55 and up, the other is 62 and up. So it could be an age-restricted project. The reason I specialize in that, it has no impact on our schools. It has very little impact on drive time because the seniors, a lot of them don't have cars to begin with, but most of them are not commuting to and from work. The idea for a project like this is to allow seniors to age in place and to assist people who are in our community, like teachers, police, fire, people we want to live in our community who are currently, because of rents, driving half hour, 45 minutes, 60 minutes in a commute just to get to work. So that's the idea. It's a little bit different from what you're describing. And I just wanted to make sure that that was clarified.
No, thank you for the clarity. I appreciate it. But just confirming, this is being, presented as a low-income project, exclusive from it being an age specific community. Is that correct?
No, for the third time, it is not intended to be a low-income project. That definition is rents that are what are defined as extremely low at 30% of the average area median income. These rents would be at 60% of the area median income. And as I said, the difference between a Class A market rate unit would be $200, $300, or $400 per month. And the rents are already substantial in the community. As one of your residents said.
We pay the mortgages in the community, Dr. Bob, so we get that. All right, and I appreciate that feedback. I guess for the attorney, why has the church not talked openly with the community about this project? Why did we have to find out through the press?
Paul, I think he's answered that 3 times now, that this happened in a period of about 8 days. That was not the intention of the church to withhold anything. If anything, the church plans to have a significant outreach to the community and talk about this. It was a matter of circumstance that we learned about the SSPA about 8 or 10 days before the deadline. So we filed with it. It was not to circumvent any type of communication. To the contrary, the church will be very forthcoming and have numerous public discussions.
Actually, Dr. Bob, you'd said that.
So I just want to apologize. We do have 18 hands that we need to get through, and we want to do our best to get through as many hands as we can. Can't guarantee that we have the ability to get through 18, but we have spent a lot of time with Paul, so I just want to make sure that we are able to get to it.
Paul's doing a good job.
Wait a minute.
Nope. So there's 290 people on this call, so we got to get through as many as we can. So Lenny, you're next.
Is that what you're saying, Greg?
Thank you for that. As a 35-year resident of Franklin Farm, the diagram that you showed on the proposal doesn't show where the roads go. It makes it look like it goes out onto Franklin or to Fairfax County Parkway. It does not. It feeds the traffic from 157 units into our neighborhoods through the church and the KinderCare, and then into actual cul-de-sac in our neighborhood. So what gives your project the right to dump traffic from these units into our neighborhood roads, which are not designed for high density? That's a congestion is a safety issue for the children on these streets.
Yeah, we don't have the right to open into the cul-de-sac. That was something that was shown in the feasibility study. As I mentioned, the drawing is not an engineered drawing. It's not prepared by professional engineers and architects. It was it was the product of the study that the students performed. The notion was that you needed a secondary means of egress from the property. So that was shown on the plan for the cul-de-sac. That has not been verified that that's needed or expected by the county. So please take it as that at this point.
And I'll add one thing because I've gotten a lot of questions about that in the chat from the staff standpoint. We did publish what we call a one-pager, which is just our quick summary of kind of the proposal and a couple of considerations for further review. And from the staff standpoint, we would encourage a reconsideration of that access point, just given that it's only a 10-foot strip between the two homes that are at the cul-de-sac. So just want to make sure that everyone's kind of aware that on the staff standpoint, we've taken a look at that because that's gotten a lot of comments in the emails that we've received. And so we would encourage, if this proposal does advance for further review, and there's a traffic study that access would be off of Franklin Farm Road and not off of the cul-de-sac.
But even at Franklin Farm Road, that's very congested already.
Correct. Yeah, and we appreciate that, and I just want to make sure that was clear in terms of the secondary access point in particular. But Lenny, I know what you're talking about. I've driven Franklin Farms Road many, many times, so I know exactly what you're describing.
Okay, Jimmy Harsh Parker.
Yes. Aaron, Graham, thank you for your time. Dr. Bob, Evan, thank you for your time. We appreciate having ears here tonight for this. I feel like of all my questions, several have been asked, so I'll try and keep my stuff brief. The biggest item that I think is worrisome to me is that this can become a very precedent-setting case for the county. There is no refuting the need for affordable housing for the units that we have. The county's goal for 10,000 units by I think it's 2034 is substantial and needed. There are examples of this all across Northern Virginia that have been successful. Examples of that are Kindred Crossing and Cleve View in Fairfax County, the Spire, the Waypoint in Alexandria, Unity at Ballston. But the reason that these buildings are successful is because the zoning that's required on these church properties to do this kind of study are also adjacent to other high density zoning areas. Most of those properties are adjacent to other high density land or high density zone structures or plots. Some are P20, some are higher. This is suggesting that we're going to take a high density structure and place it in a property that is P2 zoned and will be adjacent to other P2 zone structures. That kind of a zoning increase worries me for the capacity that it now threatens all other local residential neighborhoods, that this kind of zoning can be done. So not just in Sully district, but in Fairfax County as well. And I feel like there's a threat to these communities. So my question is what is there a precedent for randomly placing a high density structure in a local residential neighborhood in the past? And then my second question is regarding the traffic. I live off of that Brynwood Court. I don't want to address that. It sounds like it's been addressed already by Evan. But the KinderCare facility that absorbs a lot of or shares this traffic with the church, they typically share off cycle. The KinderCare has the majority of the traffic Monday to Friday. The church sees it typically on the weekends, with the exception of their food pantry days. I think anybody in the farm can comment that the day that the food pantry is open on Tuesdays, the traffic on Franklin Farm Road and the pickup lines coming into the KinderCare are just absolutely atrocious. And that's just on one day for a few hours. Our concern is that by putting a high density structure sharing that same roadway, that now becomes a massive backlog of traffic and a massive safety hazard all day, every day, just because of the amount of traffic that's being asked in there. So my second question is related to that, is like, how would that be addressed by the developer?
So those are very fair concerns. It's an excellent question. Just to give you to take the first question about precedents, You're right. This is largely a suburban area. I've certainly worked on many projects where a four-story building goes into an area that is near single-family homes. I can't give you any examples off the top of my head, but I have worked on projects like that. Your concern about harmony with the surrounding development is definitely something that will be part of this process. If this nomination goes forward, it's going to be even more part of the process if it were part of considered as part of a future rezoning application. And as to the traffic impacts, that is exactly the kind of stuff that we would need to hire a traffic engineer to do a study that would be shared with the community, but it would be reviewed by Fairfax County transportation staff. It'd be reviewed by VDOT, and we'd have to delve into, okay, these are the activities that go on at the church, including the food pantry, and these are the kinds of levels of traffic that come with that, and how would that interface with the anticipated levels of traffic from this development and with the existing farm community. All of that would have to be addressed. And I suspect if this moves forward, just to give you an idea of what goes into these SSPA nominations, it's ultimately a request to change the language in the comp plan to allow for a rezoning to be considered. And very often it includes bulleted conditions in the comp plan that says, as an option, affordable housing up to so many, or a project for multifamily housing could be considered on this property with a substantial affordable housing component. And it would probably almost certainly include, I'll say certainly include a note saying that provided any development application can demonstrate, mitigation of traffic impacts for the community. As a flag, so that in case everybody moves away or forgets, that this is something the comp plan says has to be thoroughly studied as part of the rezoning process.
And I'll add one thing just from the county staff standpoint regarding the precedence of something like this. There have been a couple of unique cases of similar types of situations in the county recently where houses of worship, either churches, mosques, have been interested in doing development on portions of their property that are not currently in use. Either they're wooded or they're vacant or they have excess parking that they just don't need anymore. So it's not unprecedented for us to receive these kinds of requests. One thing that I would mention is it really here from a policy standpoint, within a suburban neighborhood, which is a land use classification we have that Franklin Farms is absolutely a part of, it really comes down to compatibility and what can fit and what is generally consistent with the overall pattern of development, while also recognizing, and this is kind of where it becomes a difficult policy call, while also looking at the needs and the goals that the county has for affordable housing. So one recent example, if you're looking for one that's relatively recent that has gone the distance, so to speak, and has actually gone from plan amendment to rezoning, is the First Christian Church, which is between Bailey's Crossroads and Seven Corners in the Mason District. And I'd be happy to send the staff report for that in the chat so that people take a look at something that's similar enough in terms of the type of proposal, roughly similar, 4 stories on a church, retaining the church, different neighborhood, obviously, it's a different place within the county, but it's also a suburban neighborhood. So there is precedent for doing this kind of thing. We're working on one right now that's in the Idlewood Road area, close to West Falls Church, for example. So these kinds of requests, they're actually becoming more and more common. And so we do have precedent for looking at these kinds of things within suburban neighborhoods. Ultimately, it comes down to, as I mentioned earlier, compatible use type, intensity, buffers, and mitigation of impacts.
Okay, it looks like Maytrot.
Yes, that's me. Thank you for putting this on. Professor, what's your interest in this? Do you have a financial interest at all in this? I'll take that as you're not going to answer. Okay, well, this is proposed at 150 units. when your first PowerPoint slides. This is an 1800 home plan development. That would raise it close to by almost 10% on a whim, or excuse me, on the product of a Georgetown student that you felt was compelling and that you brought forth to drive to completion. Without, you might have, all he has to do, the minister, all he has to do is drive down the road and sit and wait at the Fairfax County, excuse me, the Franklin Farm Association building. And I'm sure the woman who's in charge would have gladly welcomed him in and he could have told her all about it. But he didn't do that. And we have 4 spurless assertions that you did try to contact us. So good faith really hasn't been established here, violating the faith of the Franklin Farm Association, who allowed the church there. What is the church going to do after these 150 units are put in place? Do they continue to conduct business, or is the church going out of business? What's the full plan, Doctor?
I don't even know how to begin to answer that question if the church is going to go out of business.
Well, it's going to be part of this 150 unit community in the middle of an 1800 home community.
I don't understand what your question is, sir.
That little block of land that you want to drop 150 units on is part of a planned development of 1800 homes. So you want to radically change the fabric of this community on a plan you liked from one of your students. That's how it sounds, Doc. I know you may have been doing this since '86, but this is when this foundation was built in '86. So, yeah, obviously I'm against it, but the traffic level on Franklin Farm, you want housing, go down to the end of the block of Franklin Farm at Centerville Road, where they're building a lot of new available housing. And I believe some of it's affordable. I don't see why you don't see why we would see this is a violation of our rights, legal rights, and that we wouldn't protect those rights. Yeah, I mean, it's all well and good to talk about this, but the practicalities of it are home values, legal ownership, covenants, established covenants, and what's best for the good of the community, the existing community.
Thank you for your comments. Appreciate it. I would just reiterate that this is the very, very, very first meeting of, if this does move forward and gets studied in further detail in any level of review, there would be many, many more meetings. So I just want to make sure that everyone's aware that this may be the first time that you're hearing about this or you recently heard about it. But that's because we have this cycle, and we have this cycle every 2 years where these kinds of proposals can be put forward. And so that's okay. And I think that that's one of the reasons that we're doing this community meeting, is to make sure that we hear the feedback from the community, and specifically, looking at the issues that y'all have raised about traffic and about the covenants, about compatibility in particular. So I appreciate those comments. Next up, we have Charles Adams.
Thank you. First off, let me just say it's really hard for me to imagine how it's possible that a faith-based organization, a graduate student, and an outside nonprofit can initiate this entire plan, move forward with this plan without demonstrating any local need or community support from those in the neighborhood. I mean, I'm assuming trying to ram the process through in 8 days before the deadline, as Dr. Bob alluded to, is probably the reason why, but that is my assumption. But look, here's the deal. My spouse and I, we spent about 10 years pinching pennies to be able to afford a home here in Franklin Farm. Our home, to be blunt, was nearly $1 million. It wasn't one of those nice $200,000 to $300,000 homes that Evan's family purchased early on. It was incredibly expensive, and we bought here because it's peaceful, it's safe, there's a sense of community. We did pay rent to our parents to be able to make it this far, and this project absolutely impedes all of that we looked for. Now, here's my question to those on the call. My understanding is that this plan is going to clear almost 6 acres of mature woods, marshland that is right there. This is a massive environmental impact, something I think that Fairfax County cares a lot about. And it's one of the reasons why this neighborhood is so special. It's why my 4-year-old and my 1-year-old love to be outside playing in the beautiful nature. It's something truly unique to Fairfax County. And I mean that. This is a unique, one-of-a-kind neighborhood. How can the county and the developer justify permanently removing one of these last, in my mind, one of these last natural habitats in this part of the county?
Just on behalf of the nominator, I'll say that tree removal is absolutely a thing we're going to have to show on our plans as part of a future rezoning effort, and we would be required to meet the county's replanting standards, and we would make every effort to work with the community to preserve the most healthy mature trees. That's something that's done on every project. As I've said many times this evening, what you have before you right now, as much as you may think of it this way, is not a final plan. This is a sketch, and what you see here to say that we'd be clear cutting 6 acres is simply not accurate. There would have to be trees removed. That's undeniable, but we would try to do that in a thoughtful manner, and maintaining a buffer with the community would certainly be prioritized.
Well, I appreciate that answer. And let me just add, I was going to talk about this, but I was asked, but we also have significant concerns with the traffic impact. When we look out our rear window, we hear the street racing going on Fairfax County Parkway. We know how hard Fairfax County Police works to try and control that. Understanding you guys have to find a new way to move the traffic around, potentially onto Franklin Farm Road, which is right where a daycare is, where my children are running and playing and biking throughout there, with over 150 new residences trying to jam through that spot with what's already going on Fairfax County Parkway. This is not a question but a statement, but this is just a terrible, terrible idea. And myself and other residents are going to fight this to the bitter end if it moves forward. Thank you.
Okay, Kay Prising is next.
Yeah, thank you. I share a lot of the concerns that Charles and Matrot, et cetera, have brought. So I just have one question. Someone previously said that a grade intersection improvement was planned for Fairfax County Parkway and Franklin Farm Road. My question is, when is that going to happen?
So that's in the comprehensive plan, but nothing in of that nature in the plan happens until it goes, first of all, onto our it's called our 6-year transportation plan, which is capital improvement sort of planning that this has funding. When funding becomes available, that's when it goes on to that, and that's when it becomes more imminent in terms of construction. But right now, as I understand it, there's no funding for this or anything like that. So it's just on the plan.
Okay, right.
There's no timeline for it right now.
Right. Well, that kind of gets to my point. We have this plan, and I understand the assumptions about the 8-day oh my gosh, we got to put it on the SSPA because the next time is 4 years. But my point is, why don't we exercise a little common sense with the infrastructure? Like, just like the lady who mentioned the trip to the doctor and the lack of police stations and fire stations, build that first before we virtue signal our way into some affordable care housing plan that the community and the intersection it can't handle. And that's my point. I'll spare any more soliloquies on it, but there you go.
So just
Evan, I'd be happy to just take that real quick on the county's end. With regard, you had a question and kind of raised the point about common sense. And here's what I would say is we have in our comprehensive plan, transportation plan, we have planned interchanges at a number of locations throughout the county where, as we look at land use projects around those areas, because we don't have $500 million to spend on a lot of these very massive and very impactful transportation improvements, we've been looking at what we would think would be common sense solutions that would allow traffic to move in a more, allow traffic to move around better, but doesn't have the environmental impact and doesn't have the visual impact that something like a true grade separated interchange would produce. We've been doing that more and more recently over the past couple of years in particular, because this kind of question keeps coming up in a number of locations throughout the county. So I would just say, if this does get added to our work program for formal review, where there's a transportation impact analysis where we're looking at traffic and pedestrian and bicycle movements, I'm sure that would be something that we would look at in this instance. Would be, are there alternatives to looking at a true grade separated interchange? Because while that might be able to move traffic, vehicle traffic around, there's an impact in terms of being able to get through an intersection by bike and walking, and just additional right-of-way impacts that I don't think most people would really want at the end of the
day.
So
well, thank you for that explanation. I would just, as a further comment, add, I mean, I know these traffic impact studies happen, but I have no faith in them. Anyone who's tried to get from Centerville Road through the other side of the Franklin Farm Road across the County Parkway when Dulles Discovery lets out, like whoever built that traffic study clearly didn't live here or didn't care. I just feel like these things are all fudged and it's an after the fact attempt, because if you try to get anywhere on that road, it is just a line of cars bumper to bumper from Fairfax County Parkway all the way to Centerville Road when Dulles Discovery lets out. And it's just not conducive. So it doesn't work, is I guess my point with these traffic studies. Over.
No, I appreciate that. And if this does get added to the work program for formal review with the traffic study, I hear what you're saying. And there are cumulative impacts, as I think y'all are probably aware of, different areas of the county developing at different points in time. And so we do, and we have been making a concerted effort through those studies to make sure that we're accounting for the cumulative impact of changes that are occurring in a more systematic manner. So you're mentioning Discovery Square in particular. Having worked in Fairfax Center and then lived in Herndon, and having taken Franklin Farm Road, I know what you're talking about. So I appreciate that sentiment, and it'll be something that we would study in greater detail if this does move forward.
And Graham, this is Clara Johnson again, DPD staff. I know there's a long line of people waiting to comment. Somebody mentioned Discovery Square. There are plan amendments on the work program for Discovery Square, and a meeting will be announced. Probably it'll be scheduled for the end of April. And so we'll reach out to HOA leadership in the area and make sure people are aware of that meeting as soon as it's scheduled.
Okay, I think Dale Ludicky is next.
Good evening, Aaron. Thank you so much for extending your time. We really appreciate it. Your attention to this is very important to us. And I just want to extend my sincere gratitude to my Franklin Farm neighbors and communities. When this surprise hit us, people reacted very quickly, and I just appreciate everybody's support and getting out very quickly and getting on this. This is very important. I will say the one thing that came out of this good is we really did come together. The communities have really been great. I want to address a couple of things. First thing is this whole idea of who did what to whom about this thing happening. This 8 days when we had to get it in 8 days because something was going to happen on the 9th day. The disregard for and dismissal of Franklin Farm is just atrocious. It is so irresponsible. There is such a huge break of trust with the church. Community is not in that name. I can't hear it. I just can't hear it. I live on Autumn Hill Lane, and you'll see my house butted up against the parking lot. Really, really, really fantastic drawing there. Here's how this all happened. So, because they had to just rush this in 8 days, congratulations, 8 days. We found out about it because my wife found it on Fairfax now. And our community actually called the church and set up the meeting. It was not the pastor, it wasn't the church. There's been no outreach from that church. None. They don't care. They just don't care. So we reached out to them. We had a meeting with them. We've had some email exchanges with them. Nothing's really been resolved by those emails. But it was only after we met with them that they contacted the foundation, Dr. Cristiano. And when they contacted the foundation, Ruth Lynn did exactly what she's supposed to do. She contacted the Board of Trustees. And the Board of Trustees said, wait a minute, they're in violation. Get legal on it. That's what happens when you jump the gun. When you don't go talk to the community, you're going to get slapped with it. And that's what happened. So don't come back to Franklin Farm and blame us. Do not do that. Do not do that. It's unfair that you submitted this thing without talking to us to begin with. So don't come back to us now and say it's all our fault.
And a thesis didn't get written in a couple of weeks since December. Please don't insult our intelligence.
Sorry. Just sorry. It's my time.
No, I'm agreeing with you, sir. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying they're trying to tell us that it was such a rush.
Can I spend my time, please?
I'm sorry. I'm a resident. I'm agreeing with you. I'm saying it's erroneous.
That's fine. It's my time. Get off the phone. Thank you. I want to address this thing too about this the demographic. So if you listen to the video, there are 3 things Dr. Cristiano mentioned. He just talked about this whole thing about affordable housing. Well, in the actual video, he says that they could actually do what they call averaging. So what they can do is they can actually let people in that only have 30% ability to pay. And they'll offset that with other people who can pay 90%. So back to this whole thing about affordable housing versus a low income, based upon Dr. Cristiano's representation in the video, they can have low income housing. They'll just average it out. So there you have that, Dr. Cristiano. One more time. The other thing he mentioned to the UMC members is, oh, by the way, we can actually arrange it where you guys get first right of refusal. So you all can actually, we'll know about it for anybody else, so you all can get somebody in there before somebody else gets the apartment. That doesn't sound very fair, does it? And then this whole thing about putting seniors in to get the thing approved and then thinking about multi-generational. So my question to Fairfax County is, how are you going to handle this? This is such deception and deceit. I have a hard time even thinking about it. How are you going to handle this kind of just misrepresentation?
Yeah, Dale, I think it's what you're speaking to is, kind of a judgment rather than a fact. And so.
No, it's a fact. This is a fact. You can look at the video and it's a fact.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying, but I think the way that it's being described is, is as a judgment, and that's fine.
Well, I got to tell you, if Dr. Cristiano is doing the judgment, it's poor.
Okay.
Really poor. The other thing I'm concerned about him is this. It was also clear in this video that he has very tight relationships with Tom Fleetwood and the Department of Housing Development. He described it as pretty good relationships, all the major players, because he did a symposium with them, that they're going to come down to the staff. They're going to come down. Once they get going, come down to the staff from Tom Fleetwood's office. It's going to be tremendously beneficial. We just have to ask the question, how tainted is this thing with Dr. Cristiano?
Okay. Well, thanks, Dale. Just to make sure that we're focusing on the topic at hand, we've had a couple of.
Well, this is the topic, isn't it? Because
I'm sorry, I'm talking.
all right, I'm sorry. You're right. Go ahead.
Let's try to refrain from impugning people's character. We're here to talk about a land use proposal. And the kind of feedback. No. Let me talk. The kind of feedback that we would like to get from the staff standpoint, and I think that would be useful for the planning commission and the board, are people's opinions about the proposal. And I know that there's a lot of strong opinions about this, and that's fine, and that's why we're doing this. But the purpose is to gather feedback on the proposal. And so I would just ask. I know we've got several more people to get through. We do want to make sure that there is time to get through them. Let's try to focus on the topic at hand, which is land use planning.
Okay. Sarah Masters is next.
Yes, thank you. I heard a few people mention that there were 300, now it's less people on the call that were opposed to this. And I just really wanted to make sure that you understood that some of the people who are on this call are in favor of this proposal, and that includes me. And I'm just hearing a lack of caring about people's lives and dignity, which I very much believe are worth more than people's property values. And I urge those who are against this to remember to have compassion for those that are less fortunate than you. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Karen is next. Karen, again, I apologize if I mispronounce your name. Go ahead.
Fine. My name's Karen Cashy. I'm a resident of Franklin Farm. I've lived here for 8 years, and I was born and raised in Fairfax County. We actually own a second home where affordable housing was put in Fairfax Corner on government property. I think it was very fluid. It made sense. It was within a probably 15-year period of its thought process to its inception. It's not always a fun process. Saying that and then coming here, I can't imagine seeing that type of housing structure in Franklin Farm. And I do have several questions and concerns for Evan Pritchard and Dr. Cristiano. I want to make it clear that as a real estate professional and somebody who studied this in college, I won the School of Management Business competition at George Mason for rent to own development within Fairfax County. And that's because it provides renters the ability to make money. The only part here where I'm seeing somebody make money isn't just the church. Truthfully, I don't think this is going to solve their solvency issue. Their solvency issue will not be solved unless they grow their congregation. And there is no outreach into our community. I've never once received a flyer from the church. I've never had anybody walking the community from the church. We as Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts have attended the church to drop off food, to help with the food pantry, to do Boy Scout events there, but never has there been any outreach. So I know for a fact the outreach has not happened regarding this project. But I also know that just like the cell phone tower, which was erroneously placed onto this land without HOA consent, that this project will not solve the church's issue. The church's issue is more inherent than this. So my question is, what is the profit margin that the developer has to build these units? And how many times has a developer like Dr. Cristiano and his 503B created plans like this, like what was built over in the government center property? That was actually proposed as civil servant low income. But when it went in, it was just plain affordable housing. There wasn't anything related to there being nurses or firefighters or police officers, especially even with the police officers' headquarters being put in right there. That is just straight low income for the county. It's needed. It's in the right spot. But this is going to be a pivot. They've already mentioned it multiple times during the call. I've seen a lot of calamitous oversights here. And I appreciate that this diagram that's up on the screen is the correct one, because that emergency access street affects every single person that walks a dog in the farm, that owns a dog in the farm, has little children in the farm. People bought that particular property for its lot. That was sold on a premium lot. And so were all the ones on Autumn Hill backing to Woods. I've also read the VDOT and the FCDOT plans, the comprehensive capital improvement plans for the intersection here at Franklin Farm. Those are things that have been in the works for many, many years. They do cost hundreds of thousands, millions of dollars to get through. But you can see the eminent domain that's taken place to make the parkway. If you look at the original map of Franklin Farm, it's actually called the proposed Fairfax Byway. So it is a concern for me that we, at some point, are we going to be paying Fairfax County through development money to make a flyover here, just like we're doing over on Pope's Head and Fairfax County Parkway. In the capital improvement plan, what I see is Spring Haven and Fairfax County Parkway, Franklin Farm Road area there. So if you're going to put in affordable housing, are you using money from the county, from this development, in order to fund that level of project?
So to your specific question about impacts and how transportation projects of, like an interchange get funded, as a part of the development application process, if they do go to a rezoning, if the comprehensive plan is formally evaluated and if there is a development application, often there will be a discussion about impacts. And so if there is an identified need to look at specific monies that are proffered to help fund some of the transportation improvements that are necessary in the area, that can be a discussion that we have at the time of the rezoning. Obviously, the amount needs to be proportional to the impact of the project, so we can't ask the church to fund a flyover, for example, but that is a part of our standard development application review process, is looking at what are the impacts and what can be done to solve both existing problems as well as any impacts and problems that might be presented by the proposal. So
you might not be able to ask the church, but you can certainly ask the deep-pocketed developer, who most likely, and one of my first questions was, what is the profit margin that the developer is going to retain against the church? So how much does the church receive for this project in proposal, and how much is the developer supposed to receive? And when does the church begin receiving funding? Because the church's issue, this entire thing started by solvency. When I looked at the church and what was happening, even on Christmas Eve, a day when that church should be packed, and you've got 1,800 homes within this community, nobody in this community is going to that church. You went to Flores, they had 5 different services across 2 days, and every single one was packed. And they were packed with multiple different residents from our community. So why are we driving 15 minutes away to a different Methodist church when this is the church we donate food to, that we serve at?
Evan,
I truthfully...
Sorry. Evan, do you want to answer that question?
I don't have information about profit margins because we don't have a project at this point. We have an idea.
Evan, I'm sorry, but I'm going to call BS on that, because no one's starting a project without understanding their profit margin, especially from a development perspective.
Well,
and the only thing I can think of at this
point, all you want, and you can rant and rave as long as you want, but I honestly do not have an answer for you. I'm a land use attorney. I help people get comp plan changes. I help people get rezoned.
Then why didn't you do your due diligence and even make sure that the HOA that this church is a part of? I'm not going to fault the church for not.
I'm not going to dignify that with a response.
But you absolutely, as an attorney.
We got to move on.
But you took the project to the county, so there has to be some plan. I mean, you cannot just.
Okay, so just make sure everybody's aware. What we're doing is we're going in order for folks that have their hands raised, and so if people do speak out, we will mute you. So just want to make sure that we retain control of this meeting, because we have 254 people on it. We don't have the ability to have cross chatter. Sorry. The next speaker is Rashida Kumar.
Hello, hi, can you hear me?
We can hear you. Go ahead.
Yeah, thank you for allowing me to speak today. I am a resident here, like everyone else, and because there has been all this discussion about why we don't like it, I'll just put my weight behind all the reasons why I agree with this project shouldn't be here. But also, as a taxpayer and a voter, my question to the county is why are we entertaining a half-baked idea like this? It seems there is like the the proposal, they have themselves said, we thought about this for 8 days and then we just decided to go and apply for it. So is it now that you have heard us and heard them, I think county should just reject this proposal because it seems that the cost benefit analysis in terms of how much resources you are putting in the taxpayers' money that you're spending on a half-baked idea where they don't even have the right proposal. It's just I don't even understand why we're talking about this at this point, or why there should be a second meeting about this point. Because if you think of it, we have spent almost now 3 hours at 10 o'clock on this. How much money, in terms of money, your time has cost the taxpayer? And for a proposal that they themselves are saying, oh, we haven't thought about it. We don't know how many trees we're going to take down. We don't know where the exit is going to be. We don't know what we're going to do about the petroleum line. We don't know what we're going to do about drainage. They don't know anything. When they don't know anything, maybe they should withdraw the proposal and come back when they know something. They don't even know how many units they're going to build. They don't know. So why are we discussing this? Why are we wasting the county voters and taxpayers' time and money on something that nobody knows anything about? That is my question to you as county representatives and planning commission. So this is not me talking as a resident. This is me talking as a taxpayer and a voter. Second point is that I am still very confused about whether this is going to be a, a, a senior housing. Is it going to be affordable housing? Do you really think $200 off a month of a rent in this area is affordable? I don't even know. Like, I'm not a mathematician. I'm not going to go into the mathematics of 60% this, 70% that. But the impact something like this is going to have on this community for a little bit of rent, lower rent than what you would pay for market rate. For that, we have other communities like Arrowbrook. Why do you want to bring a high density area in a community which is not equipped for it? I was there. I heard the Arrowbrook Center proposal. There are so many good things about it. I mean, I'm sure those residents have their own problems, but look at that land. It has so many amenities that are there for a high density area. Do you see the same thing in this area? Like, why do you want to bring in something that will actually have the same population of the entire Franklin farm in one lot? Like, I don't even see how this makes sense. And from that point of view, I really oppose it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rashida. Jill
Thank you,
Norcross.
Well, real quick, Aaron, Rashida,
Yep.
to your question about why would we entertain this right now? That's what we're trying to figure out right now. So I know that screening is kind of an unusual thing because at this point it's very early on. We haven't formally reviewed the proposal. We haven't studied the impacts yet. And so in some ways, the screening meeting is really just trying to make sure that we've got a good sense of what the community's priorities are. And, if people are opposed to it, if they're in support of it, that's why we're doing this. So it may be frustrating, and I totally get that. But part of your question is why would we consider it further is exactly what we're trying to figure out right now. And that is the whole point of screening, is to try to figure out, is this something that we should spend time working on either now or in the near future, based on what the community is interested in, what the nominator's goals are, and what ultimately makes sense from a land use planning standpoint. So that might not be a super satisfactory answer, but that's exactly what we're trying to do with screening. That's the whole point.
Okay, Jill Norcross.
Yes, thank you so much for the opportunity to speak. And I just want to add my name to the list of people who are supportive of the church being allowed to be permitted to follow this SSPA process. It really is so early in the development cycle, but I can certainly understand all of the comments and concerns by the neighbors, and why we're doing this process, which I think is really informative for everyone. I also want to be transparent that I work in affordable housing for the Northern Virginia Affordable Housing Alliance, but I am a 20-year Fairfax County resident. I don't live far from the church, and I've worked in this field for a long time. Our organization does a lot of education around our housing needs in Fairfax, and we do hear from a lot of residents who fully support additional affordable housing being built in the county and Sully district. I also have had experience representing several faith-based affordable housing communities that were built in Alexandria and Arlington, many referenced by earlier speakers, several of which did abut single-family homes and lower density uses in the other jurisdictions, just to comment. And while I'm not working on this project, other than an educator and advocate, I'm also very happy to have conversations with neighbors about how other developments have been financed, how the process has worked, and really how these projects have ended up as a win-win for the community, the residents, and their faith partners. So just wanting to add that there are financing tools that are in place that would allow somebody to kind of run rough numbers to determine that the numbers do work for this development. So I think that's probably why the project has moved forward to the SSPA cycle. I don't know for sure, but just in my experience working with churches and developers, that's what typically happens. So I know there'll be additional community engagement. I know the church is really intentional about doing that. Every faith-based project that I've worked on, it's never early enough for the neighbors to find out about it. I can really understand your concerns, but for those who are kind of open and willing to learn more about the process, I just hope that you'll give the church some time and grace, because it obviously was, the 8-day was a quick turnaround, but there has been some thought and a lot of thought, I think, gone into this process so far.
Yeah.
And welcome just some more conversation about it for those who want to learn more. I know many of you won't support it no matter what happens or what changes with the project, but for those who are interested, just kind of invite you to learn more. So thank you.
Thank you. Suresh?
Hi, thank you for letting me speak. So when I heard about this proposal, the one thing that I did was, or the first thing I did was I got onto Google Earth, started from Route 7 all the way to 95. And what I noticed was there were no high density residential structures close to 286. And there is a very practical reason for that, because pollution. You don't want to have anything high density, and that too close to a junction, wherein every time the light is red, you're going to have a lot of fumes. And especially at this intersection, you actually have the wind blowing from southwest to northeast. So everything's going to come into your home. Now imagine a multi-story structure and all this pollution is into their respective homes. And that is actually a health concern. So why set up something like that right there? I mean, there are many other places. I'm all for affordable housing. But why here? This is actually a bad place. If it's let's say if it's commercial stuff, it would make sense, but not a residential stuff. It's you're just gonna have all these fumes coming in, noise pollution, and the traffic concerns that mentioned by the housing committee members. That is one. The second thing, it's a question actually for the Fairfax County officials. How hard is it to, let's say you have decided that this housing development is going to be affordable housing, and to make it 55 plus?
Suresh, I think you dropped off at the last point of your question. Were you
Okay, so let me
asking
repeat my question.
how sure are we that this will be an affordable housing project? Is that what your question was?
Now, my question is, this is right now being mentioned as an affordable housing project. How hard is it that once a project starts, it can be changed into a 55 plus project, housing project?
If the project does advance for further review and there's a plan amendment and a rezoning application, those kinds of details do get worked out prior to the approval, certainly. So I think if there is a question about that, that's the kind of thing that we evaluate in the context of the development application.
Okay, but either way, even if it's a 55 plus or even if it's unaffordable, not the right place to actually have a high density residential structure.
Okay.
As I mentioned, it's a pollution thing. And that's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Appreciate those comments.
Tim?
Hey, can you hear me?
Yes. Go ahead.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks for extending this to the staff. It's my first experience with county government. It's been a positive one. My question is for the staff, and it is related to what Rashida was talking about, which is like, what is the process used to determine whether it's a good use of county resources to advance this proposal? Like in this case, the nominators have mentioned that the deficiencies come from the proposal being rushed and prepared under a short period of time. And do you take the effort that the nominators have put into the proposal in terms of whether you determine whether to advance it or not? That's the first part of the question. The second part is, do you take into account the probability that the project will be successful and whether you would advance this nomination or not? Like specifically, I'm wondering, while you can't take into account the covenants, explicitly in your decision-making process, like if the covenants are going to prevent this thing from being built because they're pretty ironclad and they're attached to the deed, does it make sense for the county to be using its resources on considering something that ultimately can't be built? So just would like the staff to speak a little bit on the thought process behind whether they advance something or not.
Yeah, good question, Tim. So I just dropped it into the chat. This is our site-specific plan amendment nominator guide. It's not just for nominators. Anybody that wants to can read it to learn a little bit more in depth and detail about the process, but then also to your question about how do we make our decisions? Because I think it's a good question. What we have are published justification criteria for whether we think a nomination should advance for formal review as a plan amendment or not. And so these are published criteria that we and the Planning Commission and the Board of Supervisors use to help guide the answer to your very question, which is this a good use of staff time? Is this a good project to look at in further detail? And so we have published criteria specific to that question. So I do want to make sure that everybody that has that question can access the guide. It's in the chat, and just look up justification criteria. High level, what we're looking for are nominations that advance county goals relative to housing, relative to land use planning and compatibility, that may meet other strategic objectives, such as those that are included in our strategic plan. We have a countywide strategic plan. Our One Fairfax policy, which is our racial and social equity policy. And then also from a land use standpoint, really are advancing area specific goals. So ensuring that we have compatible transitions and scale type use, that we have buffers, that we have access management that can ensure that there's safe flow of traffic, that sort of thing. So we can, we do use the concepts that are put together by the nominators as a part of that to help, because they're useful in trying to understand the nominations that have been submitted. We recognize that not all of the nomination concepts are ready to kind of advance in their current state. And so I think that's one of the things that we've heard this evening, is that there are some concerns specifically around the emergency access point, but also just, generally there might be some site planning kinds of concerns and questions that we need to resolve. So we do look at that, especially with regards to the priority. If something is added to the work program in further detail, we'll ask for revisions to nominations and work with the community as well as the applicants and nominators to make sure that what we're looking at is something where we're trying to work towards resolving questions. So I think Evan mentioned this, and I would restate it from a county standpoint, that what we have on the screen today was the initial submittal. And so what we'll look at, in the future is the comments that we received from the community, if this does advance for further review, to see if there are ways to address them. Some of the concerns, frankly, we're not going to be able to. But I think part of our process is trying to make sure that we can, where possible, address questions related to density, compatible transitions in use, buffers, access management, tree safe, a number of the other comments that we received this evening.
Awesome, thank you.
Sure.
Jennifer G.
Yes, thank you so much to the county folks for keeping this open late into the night. I am an 18-year resident of Franklin Farm, and I agree with all of the many concerns that have already been voiced. My specific question is this, though. There's been a lot of talk of, is it low income? Is it affordable housing? It's a little unclear what the plan is, but Dr. Bob seems insistent that it is senior housing. So how would the actual resident population be restricted to seniors, and who would be responsible for enforcing that forever?
Since that was asked of me, I'll be happy to answer it. A couple of reasons, Jennifer. The first is that the lender of the project would have specific requirements that the project is maintained as a senior project. Number two, people have talked about covenants. There would be a covenant of age restriction on the deed itself. Number three, a bondable, high quality property management firm would have to be retained, because the project being an affordable project, every single tenant has to have their income verified to make sure that they're in compliance. So the property management company would be engaged, the deed would be age restricted, the county approvals would be age restricted. There would be no way of doing it any other way but as it would be approved by the county.
So all of those things that you just listed out would be required in the zoning rule.
Yes.
Not something that would happen according to the project later. It's part of the zoning.
It couldn't change, because the financing and the approvals would all be contingent upon the project having that age restriction. So it couldn't be changed.
And then who would enforce that, though? That there would have to be a property manager,
of course,
as part of the deal forever to enforce that.
Of course, you couldn't run a project without having a property manager, and the property manager would specifically have the obligation contractually to make sure that the residents all adhere to the age restriction. This is something that is not only on the title, it's with the lender and with the county. It's on multiple levels.
No, Max,
Can be changed.
we can't stop.
I'm sorry?
Go ahead, Bob.
No, I was just saying there would be no way to change something that is a requirement of the project by zoning, by financing, and by management.
Yeah, and just to add to that was great, Dr. Bob. The way the proffers are structured, there are a number of steps in the process to actually get something built. And so if we were trying to deviate from what the zoning approval allowed, the county simply, before they issue any building permits, before they issue non-RUPs or RUPs, residential use permits or certificates of occupancy, they review what plans you submit for building against what the approved plans are. And if you deviate in any way, they simply don't issue the next permit you need. And then after the project is actually built, as Dr. Bob indicated, there would be covenants recorded. The county monitors this. If you want to move anybody from units, you have to provide notice as required in the covenants. And if you want to change anything in terms of like the terms of whom you're renting to, you have to get approval from the county and get those documents amended in the land records.
Or long-term guests handled?
long-term guests of tenants would
Right.
be,
Yeah, 60-year-old
yeah.
grandma having a, 17-year-old grandson staying there.
Jennifer, in most of these cases, an age restriction means no one can live in the project at under age 55 or 62.
I understand, but in reality, there's a difference between who's on the lease and who's sleeping there every night.
Well, that becomes an issue for the management company as well. If they're in violation of their lease, they're in violation of their lease.
Yes, so then we become dependent on the management company to enforce that.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Okay, Metro Park.
Hi, everyone. Can you all hear me?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. I'm sick with the flu, so thank you for this opportunity. My name is Priscilla, and I've lived in the Franklin Farm neighborhood since 1991, so I've probably beat out the last guy who was here for 30 years. I, for one, am looking forward to learning more about this project. I've loved growing up here. I love the ponds. I love the parks. I love the walking trails. I run every morning. I'm sure I've seen many of the people on this call. But probably even bigger than that, I am grateful for the opportunity to have lived here. My parents were lucky to get a house here for kind of like you, Evan, except they might have beat out your parents. They got theirs for less than $200,000. We lived really humbly. My parents sacrificed a lot to get us into a Fairfax County public school. And I think it's probably because of that education, I was able to get a full ride to a state school, and then I got a master's from an Ivy League and a PhD after that. And I think it's because of that excellent education that I got here. And that's a lot of education. I'm not saying it to brag. It's a lot of education because I was the daughter of a janitor. And research shows that folks like myself who grew up in the 80s and the 90s, we benefited from one of the greatest periods of spatial integration in recent history. You had folks from higher incomes and less high incomes living in close proximity to one another. And as a result, it was a tremendous time of growth. So you'll have folks of different income levels interacting side by side in grocery stores, schools, and in churches. So it was just very natural. It was easy because these are your neighbors, right? It's a lot easier to get to know someone from a different income level if they're living a neighborhood over. And it's a lot easier to understand their lives and to have true friendships when they live right next door. But unfortunately, since that time, we've seen the opposite happening. So as a country, we've become more and more segregated since the 90s, to the point where now we as a country are now as segregated as we were back in the 50s, which is what precipitated the civil rights era. All right. So you can probably see in the polarization around the nation, we have less access to someone who's not like us living around us. And that's having a tangible effect on our national discourse, our political decisions, and other impacts on our lives. So I guess I don't have a question. I just want to say thank you to the church and to the pastor and the professor for thinking critically about these issues and for working on a solution. I know that this is just the beginning. I know that there's probably a little bit of shock. I didn't know much about this, and that's why I hopped on this call. But I do look forward to seeing what you come up with. So thank you.
Thank you. Ideobald?
So, hi, good evening, everybody. Thank you for doing this. So, the question that I have actually was asked by someone else. I think she's a realtor, Karen Kashi. So, and it had to do with the economics of the entire project. So we know that there is an economic impact. There's environmental impact, there's traffic impact, there's density impact, and we know that quality of life for everybody in the neighborhood is basically going to be affected by higher density. There's no buildings that are 4 stories up in this area. So having multi apartments that are 4-story actually impact not only the entrance, the in and out, and the ecological is in every other aspect of the project. So I do not like the project. I do not agree with it. I think the economics of it are an issue that we need to think about it, because as long as the church is in financial duress, this is gonna keep happening. So probably, well, I think my question was asked before, so I certainly don't have a question. It's more of a just signing up for the project that I don't think is a project that is good for the community of Franklin Farm. And when it really concerns me is everybody who comes in and starts saying, oh yeah, this is a great idea, does not live in the area, doesn't have to deal with the traffic in the area, and doesn't have the consequences of what is going to be our day-to-day life once something like this gets implemented. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you. Jeffrey Parnes?
My name is Jeff Parnes. I am the co-chair of the Land Use and Transportation Committee of the Sully District Council and the Western Fairfax Citizens Association. The Land Use and Transportation Committee examines, from a citizen's perspective, land use and transportation matters. Last week, we had some members from the Franklin Farm community at our monthly meeting where we discussed this proposition. I encourage people who are interested in coordinating their response to work with your Franklin Farm representatives. There is Louis Grimm, who's the Sully District Council representative from the Franklin Farm location, to talk to him, to come to our meetings where people can thrash it out in a non-government organized presentation like we have tonight. And I want to thank the county representatives, Graham, Aaron, and others who have been here tonight. And it's after 10 o'clock for an hour-and-a-half meeting that's now double its length. But just imagine, we used to do these meetings and they would last until 2 o'clock in the morning. So hopefully this one won't last until 2 o'clock. But again, if you're interested, the Sully District Council is on the website at www.sullydistrict.org. We represent the citizens of Sully and not the government of Sully. So please join us. Reach out to me. I'm the webmaster 2025. If you go to the website, you'll see our mailing list and things like that. Oh, and we encourage you to join us. If you're pro and con, all those matters have to be discussed. It's worthwhile to speak to us in a venue where it's not organized by the county. Thank you again for your time. Thank you, Graham. Thank you, Aaron. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Jeff. Good to hear your voice.
Jennifer Zontag?
Hi. First of all, I want to thank you all for being on here. And I guess I just had a question/comment going back to the plans for the type of housing that this is going to be. I'm just wondering if someone could clarify the rules for senior housing in Virginia specifically. I'm not an expert in this, but what I read online, it seemed to say the requirement is that one person on the lease is 55 and over, which is not the same as everyone in the unit has to be 55. So which is it exactly in Virginia?
I'll answer the question. The requirements are those determined by the type of financing. So for example, if you have HUD financing, you have federal requirements. If you have Fannie Mae financing, you might have a local bank or a community bank that's supporting it with further support from Fannie or Freddie. So it depends on the type of lender that's there. Some are age restricted to, as I said earlier, that no one can live on the property that's under age 55 or under age 62. In some cases, there are lending requirements where a grandmother, for example, could have an underage child or student or family member that lives with them or is a caretaker. It depends on the type of financing that's arranged. So there's a wide variety, but age restricted is the primary requirement of the property itself.
But there's nothing right now that is finalized whatsoever regarding the type of financing, right?
I have to concur with what staff has said several times, that this is a very, very, very preliminary stage.
Sure. But it's worth considering these things now, right? For
of course,
those of us with an interest in what happens to the property.
Of course, I agree.
I do have one other question, and it really slash concern. It relates to do with what seems to me, my perception is a lack of transparency, because Dr. Bob, you stated in response to the other Jennifer's question that if the county approves a project for senior housing only, once that's approved for that, it can't be changed later. I'm really wondering how this squares though with the comments on the video of that some of us have seen of this planning meeting that happened between Dr. Bob and the church, where Dr. Bob says he, quote, has an affinity for seniors because I know it's going to get my project approved. So should we take that to mean that the plan would be to propose senior housing and then at some later date change it to include families? Because seniors versus families, as we've gone over multiple times here, have very different implications for infrastructure.
As I said earlier, it's a good question. As I said earlier, I've been doing seniors since 1984. And one of the things that is true is seniors are less impactful on a project than a family project. They don't impact the schools. They have very little impact on traffic. And seniors tend to behave themselves more than families. So from a standpoint of safety, police, there's less impact. I stand by that statement. It's a statement of fact. Now, if a church said we want our project to be family, that's a decision that they would be making, and that's a decision you could follow. But I stated very clearly in that meeting with the church that I have an affinity for senior because of exactly what I said. It's much more.
Well, but the end of the quote though didn't say it. Well, it said because it's easier to get the project approved.
It is.
Right.
That's just simply a statement of fact. You could ask the staff.
Is it a way to get it approved and then change it later, or is it,
you have the benefit of having your staff on this call, and you could ask them how they would view a developer who presented it as a senior project and tried to change it. It doesn't work that
exactly.
It doesn't work that way. Staff would throw you out of the room. They would never let you play a bait and switch.
Yeah, and Jennifer, I would agree with Dr. Bob. If this project got through a plan amendment and a rezoning application as a senior project, and then there was a change to want to do a multifamily building that doesn't have an age restriction, we would likely need to revisit all those approvals again. So I would agree with Dr. Bob. I don't think this is a bait and switch. It's just I think what he's describing is that there are fewer impacts. And so I would concur with him that it is easier, frankly. It is easier to get projects approved that are senior on this because there's fewer impacts that need to be mitigated.
I appreciate the additional information as someone who does not spend a lot of time reviewing this kind of stuff. So thank you for that.
No problem.
Okay, Jim Kovac.
Yes, sir. This question's for the county. Graham, you shared that document. Thank you for doing so. Take a look at it. But is there anything more specific relative to decision criteria that you can share to shut this thing down right now? Nobody wants to spend many, many more meetings going through this process when it's clear to everyone on this call. This is a square peg trying to be jammed into a round hole. It has no business in this part of the county. Everyone who intentionally, deliberately saved and did everything they could to buy a house in this community did so because they did not want to live in a high density area. So this is just, to Rashida's comment maybe a little bit ago, it's ridiculous. It's half baked. It's a terrible plan and everybody knows it. What can you share specifically where you guys at the county level step back and say, yeah, this is a no-go. We all know it. Everybody knows it. Is there a certain amount of, petitioners that have to sign the petition? You've already got one for over 1,800. Is there anything specific that you can share that shuts this thing down?
Yeah, good question. Specifically, no. That said, there are a couple of things that we would encourage you if you're interested in continuing the dialogue on this. There's a couple of things that I would point you to because I think it provides you with arguments both for and against proposals such as this one. So one would be to review the adopted comprehensive plan. So what that has are high-level countywide housing and land use goals, and that those apply across the entire county. We have, as a part of that, goals around affordable housing, the provision of affordable housing, but we also have goals around the provision of land uses, especially within suburban neighborhoods, and this is in a suburban neighborhood, of course, that really prioritize compatibility, transitions in scale, character, buffering, screening, etc. What we also have are area plan recommendations for the entire county. There are specific area plan recommendations for Franklin Farms that speak to the established dwelling units per acre, so density and use type, so residential, of course, and some retail to the west of Fairfax County Parkway. And so those provide you with the adopted comprehensive plan, and that when we're looking at potential changes, so this would be if it is formally evaluated, what we look at from a county staff standpoint is what is the impact compared to the adopted comprehensive plan. Every single place in Fairfax County already has a plan for it. And so what we look at are amendments to that. So our number one question is, what is the impact relative to the current comprehensive plan? So in the instance of Franklin Farms, it's pretty much built out as planned, for example. So one other thing that I would mention is we have published, and Aaron, maybe you could put this into the chat. We have published a very, very brief, so don't expect too much, one pager, and we call it a one pager, but it's our very, very quick staff review of the nomination, kind of describes what the current comp plan is, what the proposal is, what the high level issues are. And then we have a couple of considerations if this proposal does advance for formal review as a plan amendment. So that would be another place to look at right there. The last thing I would mention is the next step with this amendment is that we'll be holding planning commission workshops, and those will start up on May the 1st for all the nominations that we receive throughout the county. So 43 that are under current review. And so that'll be an opportunity for anybody in the community to come out and speak to the nominations that were submitted, including this nomination, as well as the other two that we talked about earlier in the evening. And so if you're interested in being a part of that, we will have plenty of agenda time to discuss this proposal. Obviously, it's generated a lot of community interest. So that would be another thing to look at. If you're looking for other opportunities for kind of learning more about SSPA, we have a website, and that catalogs, in addition to just the process and the guide, it includes historical information from prior cycles, because we do this every couple of years. So if you wanted to kind of look at other projects, see how staff has considered other projects in suburban neighborhoods and elsewhere, you can find all that information on our website.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Yep.
Beth?
And real quick, I did before Beth starts, we still have a couple more folks to get through. If it's at all possible, we want to start wrapping things up. If you have provided a comment, or if you're going to provide a comment that we've already heard something similar, I would encourage you to feel free to speak, but just maybe try to keep it brief so that we can all get out of here at a reasonable time frame. But obviously, want to make sure that we get the opportunity to hear from everybody. So if it's possible that we could shut this down by about 10:30 or so, that'd be great. Maybe that's not realistic, but I just want to put it out there that it is starting to get late, and I know people need to do other things like sleep.
Hi, this is Joe Molina. I'm on my wife's phone, Beth's. Quickly, I agree with most of the comments that were made by everybody in the Franklin Farm community, of which I'm a member. So I won't go over all of those points that were made. I wanted to ask of Dr. Bob and Graham, the county frequently has to work hand in glove with developers, and the county works closely with developers. Have you engaged in any sort of contract or agreement with a developer on either making these plans? For some reason, I can't find it, but there was a document that showed the financial remuneration the church was going to make from the proposed housing that was going to be built. I can't put my hands on it, so I really don't want to comment on the substance of it until I can. If we have a later meeting, I'll I'll find that document. But are you working with the developer now?
Simple answer is no, not at this time. It's a brand new relationship with the church. So we've not had.
Well, no, I'm asking, is the church working with the developer? You may not be working with the developer, Dr. Bob.
The answer to both is no. Sorry.
Correct.
Okay. Thank you.
So, okay.
This is the very beginning again of the process. So
no, but let's be clear. I mean, how could the church engage in a process without knowing how much money they were going to make for selling the property that they bought 30 years ago? I think they know.
They're not selling the property.
Right. Even better. They're leasing it for 20 years and then going to sell it.
No, they're leasing it for 75 years.
Okay. So there's going to be a payment on a monthly and yearly basis, right?
Yes.
Okay. And I think I would bet they probably know what that amount is so that they can stay solvent. Anyway, that was my question, but you've answered it. I appreciate it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Pastor Abby?
Hi, good evening. I'm Reverend Abby Forster. I'm the pastor at Community of Faith, and I've been mostly listening tonight to hear kind of the feedback, but I want to reassure everyone about process and how we arrived at this, because it may be foreign, I don't want to make assumptions that everyone is Christian or a person of faith. We as a church over the last 6 months have been praying, reading the scriptures, having conversation within the body to discern best next steps. We as a church, when we started as a congregation many years ago, had the intent of building a 500-person sanctuary with parking lot, much in the same way as this building is proposed before you. The body came to the conclusion over the last 6 months that we do not want to build a sanctuary, but we do want to be able to use our resources, human, land, and otherwise, to be a blessing to the larger community. As many have referenced already, the food pantry has been an active part of this small but very faithful congregation for 25 years. We celebrated that last year. It may surprise you that the top 3 zip codes that our clients come from are from 2171, 2170, and 190. So all within, close proximity to the church. As Bob and Evan mentioned at the start, we're feeding close to 50,000 people, 90% of whom receive no government assistance whatsoever, not Social Security, not WIC, not TFAP, not any of the traditional feeding programs. 4% of the kids of the clients receive free and reduced lunches, which what we've learned is that the majority of our clients are working Fairfax County residents that are not able to keep up. We have staff from the kinder care who receive, food. We have folks who have worked at the hospital, who are in our school systems, that come every week to receive food. And so this has not been an effort to make money. That's not where our heart is. Our heart is to help solve the real problems in our county, because we love our county. We love the community. I have really appreciated all the questions that people have asked. It's clear that people have very strong feelings about their neighborhood. The church itself has residents of Franklin Farm that are both on the board and in the community, as well as adjacent neighborhoods. And it has not been a rush process in terms of our own discernment, prayer, discussion. We made a decision on February 9th that we felt God was calling us to let go of the former building priorities that we had and to move to this kind of project. We had entered into a partnership with Georgetown University and then became aware. So the part that has been rushed has been the deadline that was preeminent with submitting the SSPA process. We did not want to wait 2 years because this is a concept and we wanted to engage the community as a whole. And we are now doing that and we'll continue to do that. I was really pleased to hear Larry on the call tonight. We have reached out 4 times, as Bob mentioned. My leadership board walked in at the end of February. We sent an email on the 27th of February, on March 4th, and then I again last Monday to the lawyer, as well as to the executive director, continuing to request that our board and the Franklin Farm Board would be able to have longer conversation, because we want to be able to share our heart. We want to be able to work through all of the things. But this is just the very beginning, and we continue to remain curious and open to God's leading. And I want to reassure people that the community of faith is just that. It is one of the most beautiful churches I've ever had the privilege in my nearly 30 years of serving churches to be a part of. And we have great capacity of leadership, great heart, both for the community within the walls of the church, as well as our clients, as well as the Franklin Farm residents and the larger community. We hope that everybody can continue to work together to arrive at the best outcomes for all involved. The church is not insolvent. The church is not planning on going anywhere. We want to be here for the next 100+ years, and we just want to live our values and continue to be in community with everyone. Thank you.
Okay, Paul?
Yeah, thank you, everybody. I really appreciate the opportunity again, just to share feedback. Just responding to the pastor, I appreciate the opportunity to follow you. I really do, because I grew up in the church. My mother was a Christian minister, served as a director of youth and children's ministries for many years. I understand the intricacies of the operations of the church. I've also served on session and as a deacon for many years of a major Presbyterian church in Northern Virginia. So I understand the operations. I really do. And my questions are around, I guess, just kind of the financial solvency of the church. And just straight question, would you be open to sharing your books? So we can have an honest one-on-one conversation. I yield the rest of my time. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Rick Fitzgerald? Are you there, Rick?
Yeah, I am. Can you hear me?
Yep.
All right. Sorry about that. Yeah, my name's Rick Fitzgerald. I've lived in Franklin Farms for over 40 years. So raised my kids, and now I've got 9 grandkids that visit us on a regular basis. And I happen to live right across the street from what is seen to be the entryway to the new facility. And I can tell you, as having feet on the ground here, watching traffic every day, and realizing the impact of what the government facility buildings have had and the horrendous traffic, it's become a safety issue. It's become a safety issue for the kids who walk to the schools there. You got a daycare center. These paths are walked on a regular basis. So it's a heavily walked trafficked area as well. And the differences that I've seen over the last just year have been day and night, and it's become unsafe. And now to think about the idea of having a living facility there, whether it's low-income housing or otherwise, is just, to me, it appears to be ludicrous. So I'm glad we're in the early stages of this. Hopefully that the views that are expressed on this call tonight will be listened to, and it'll have an impact on whether we move forward with this. I'd like to think that there's no further consideration for this at some future point in time. But just as a person with feet on the ground, who I'm retired, I'm out there every day walking these paths, I see what it's like. I'm not an airplane from overhead, or I'm not a drone from overhead, or I'm not looking at a map. I'm just telling you, day to day, there's too much congestion, too much traffic, and a lot of safety concerns that we all need to take into consideration. There's a playground right across the street from this entranceway, a basketball court, a tot lot. I mean, these are things that no one's really talked about as of yet, but I ask that as we move forward, they be taken into consideration. I think this is a bad idea for the reasons I've stated, and I'm happy to have the opportunity to voice my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you, Rick. Ken?
Thanks. Just wanted to make sure my comments were in bounds. So the Fairfax County SSPA website says that these meetings are for those who are affected to ask questions and provide comments. So this is a comment, not a question. I've lived in Fairfax County for 24 years, and this comment, as I say, is directed towards other Franklin Farm residents. So we've heard a lot of perspectives on this call, both for and against the proposal. And let's not kid ourselves, this is a significant development being proposed to our community. And so we as a community need to ask ourselves who we are inviting to share in the stewardship of our neighborhoods. And to me, that boils down to trust. And when it comes to building a foundation for trust, often I think it's fair to say that the past is prologue. So we've heard tonight that the church tried to reach out to us to begin a dialogue, and that's what was represented early in the process. During the comment section, we learned from a Franklin Farm resident that the first contact actually came when his wife read about it in Fairfax Now and walked over to meet with the Reverend. We've heard that this project was necessarily rushed through in 8 days in order to meet the deadline for the biennial process, and that there wasn't time to even think about connecting with the neighborhood that surrounds the community being proposed. The basis for this proposal comes from a master's degree thesis that at one point in this call was to allege to have be begun in December. I'm fairly confident that it takes more than a month to research and publish a Georgetown University master's thesis. So I believe that there was more than 8 days or 1 month in which to contemplate reaching out to Franklin Farm to begin these discussions. We've been told on 2 separate occasions in this call this evening that there has not been a financial analysis performed. And yet I've personally read the thesis in question, which included a detailed financial model with cash flow projections to all stakeholders over the next at least 10 years. And then subsequent to that, I learned we received a cease and desist letter claiming that the thesis was retroactively copyrighted, and the report was subsequently scrubbed from the church website. And now we're hearing tonight that this is a seniors only project for 55 and older only, where the lease is going to be meticulously maintained and managed by the management company that we're being asked to trust in this relationship. And yet right now, as we speak, if you go to the church website, you'll see that the need for affordable housing is cited for teachers, seniors, healthcare workers, police, fire, and emergency personnel. I've been reading the website over the last month. A month ago, seniors was one of the last on the list. It's just been moved to the front of the list, I think, but to highlight its emphasis. So, we're being asked to trust this partnership with Dr. Bob's nonprofit and the community of faith. But I have to say, trust works both ways. And these actions that I'm describing here in this meeting have not helped to build it. So that concludes my remarks. Thank you again to the staff for putting together this venue.
Thank you, Ken. David?
Excuse me, I'd like to just make a quick comment because
Sure.
my name was brought up in this. Ken, I made a specific comment that my student worked on this in the fall of last year, in the fall semester. I didn't say it was done in 8 days. I didn't say it was done in December. The student worked on it for the semester.
Professor, and you might have been thinking of it as a fall semester, but during a very heated discussion, somebody asked very excitedly, well, when was the thesis started then? And you did say the word December. Memories can differ, but the point is, it was a fall thesis. There we know for at least 4 to 5 months this was contemplated. And I understand that there was an 8-day deadline, but I think, Dr. Bob, I know you work with a lot of communities. I've myself worked in public policy at the federal level, both on the executive branch and in the legislative branch. And one of the first questions we always asked ourselves was, who are all of the stakeholders that are going to be affected by this? And let's make absolutely sure that they hear this from us first. Dr. Bob, regretfully, that is not what's happened here. And that's a breach of trust that resulted. And again, the points that I've raised in this call have just further eroded that what started in a poor position. And I've said enough. We're all trying to wrap up this call.
Thank you. David?
Yeah, real quick. I know I've already made some comments, but I wanted to respond to a couple of things. First of all, when Reverend Abby was speaking, she said that they've tried to get in touch with the Franklin Farm Board of Trustees and have a meeting of the minds, if you will. The Board of Trustees' job is governing the covenants. You can't meet with the Board of Trustees and just wave away the covenants because affordable housing is great. It doesn't work like that. They represent the covenants and the bylaws of Franklin Farm. It's the members of the community that you actually need to meet with. And you haven't been able or willing to do that. So just want to put that comment out there. The second comment that I had was about something Dr. Bob said about the covenants going into this planned site for 55 plus or whatever. How can you put covenants on this site on top of the existing Franklin Farm covenants? Wouldn't you need to get an amendment to the Franklin Farm covenants in order to have more covenants on top of that?
No.
So how does that process work? Wow.
We would draft covenants that would have to be reviewed by the county, and we would, once approved, we'd take those to the county courthouse and record them in the land records. And they would be covenants that would show up in a title report along with the Franklin Farm covenants.
So you're saying that I could create covenants for my property right now and get them recorded, and that's
the joke amongst us lawyers is you can pretty much record anything you want written on a paper towel if you pay the filing fee.
Yeah, well, that's good to know. So now we need to get enough legal representation to make sure that doesn't happen.
I thought you already had legal representation.
I do, sir.
Yeah, you mentioned it more than once, so thank you.
Well, sir, do you think there's a reason why I mentioned it? Because you seem to think.
Hey, Graham, haven't we heard from this guy a couple of times already?
Hey, everyone. We've got a couple more hands to go, and I think everybody does want to get out of here. So how about Franklin Farm? I think you're next.
Hi, thank you. Thanks for your time. I understand the long meetings, so I'm going to try to be brief, but I do want to get some points across, please. My name is Ruth Lynn. I work for Franklin Farm Foundation, and I just want to start by saying and making a suggestion to the church, to the pastor, and to Dr. Bob and Gwen. If you want to get feedback from the community, why not reach out to the community and hold a meeting in your quite large church so that you could get the feedback from the Franklin Farm residents? That's a suggestion. I'll leave that open to you. We're happy to publicize that meeting when you want to schedule it at the church and make sure that our members can come down there and communicate with you so you'll have the feedback. I do want to touch on the aspect of the Franklin Farm Board. There's 7 members of the board of Franklin Farm. The board speaks in one voice. There's no particular board member that speaks for Franklin Farm. They hold monthly meetings that are duly noticed. So in between meetings, they're not able to have conversations and make decisions unless, of course, they call for a special meeting. So I would invite Pastor Abby and Gwen to attend a board meeting and speak in member voice like all the other residents of Franklin Farm, members of Franklin Farm. Follow the process like everyone else does. please, because there's a lot of time. 7 volunteers show up at a meeting to hear concerns of the residents, and that would have been a perfect time to put your information out there and see what the feedback would have been. I also want to mention, if I could quickly, that all communications come through the Franklin Farm Foundation offices, and we provide that communication to the Board of Trustees. So please, Franklin Farm Foundation email. I've made sure it's in the chat. I've made sure that the county has that email. I also want to talk on comments that has been made tonight that's very disturbing. Our staff is on this call, and I want to clarify, because Dr. Bob, you made some comments that are very, very dishonest, sir. First will be, the first time our office was aware of this project was on the 26th day of February. We have cameras, we have videos, we have timestamps, we have emails, we have attorneys. We understand, and we're part of every communication that happened. On the 26th of February, Gwen came into the office, asked for information to contact the Board of Trustees. It was given to her. She sent an email on the 27th of February. On the 28th of February, our attorney responded to Gwen, and it was signed for 3 days later at the church. The next communication that we had was with Dr. Bob sending a cease and desist letter to the foundation over this thesis. The next contact that was made with Franklin Farm, that letter came from Dr. Bob on 3/1. On 3/13, Gwen sent another email, the same email, asking to communicate with the board. But then the church had already received a letter from their legal counsel stating that legal counsel represented Franklin Farm Foundation. Here's all the documents, the CCRs and so forth. So clearly they have been communicated with. I don't appreciate, our staff is on this call, it being stated that we haven't communicated, because that's not the case. It's absolutely false. The pastor sent an email to our counsel, Brad Barma, on the 17th of this month, in March, at 4:35 in the afternoon. Counsel responded at 5:48, less than 2 hours later. So it's super insulting to hear these comments that are absolutely takes away of any trust that we might have in your word. So I'm going to say again, please reach out and hold an open meeting in the church with the residents of Franklin Farm so that they can communicate their concerns. I'll quickly touch on some other areas for Franklin Farm that is very concerning about this project. The misuse of our amenities in the community, the drainage issues in the community, the forestry plan in the community, the environmental aspect of how this would impact the community. There are so many of these questions and so many of these concerns. And to be honest, to have our staff blindsided, our attorney legal fees that was not budgeted for, we're having to spend because there's a plan. There's a plan in place that's going to move forward without any consideration to the CCRs that's been in place for 40 plus years in Franklin Farm. And then I hear comments like, well, we'll have new CCRs with this apartment complex, and we're going to make sure everybody's 55 plus. What about the 45 years that the residents of Franklin Farm has taken care of this huge parcel of land with 1,777 homes in it? It is absolutely disgraceful how this foundation has been treated, how the residents have been treated, how our staff has been treated. And I really do expect more out of a church. And with that, I'm going to leave my invitation open for Abby, Pastor Abby, to contact our office, and we will be happy to put the information out when she, Gwen, and Dr. Bob would like to have a community meeting with the residents of Franklin Farm. We will make sure that the residents are aware of that. Meanwhile, we have a board of directors with 7 board members. Please keep your communication through the foundation office or through our legal counsel. Again, thank you for your time, and I appreciate being able to make the comments. Thank you.
Okay, iPad.
Yep, can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll try and be quick. quick because I know we're over the revised time. But I appreciate the opportunity just to highlight a couple of things. My name is Tracy Yap. I'm a almost 30-year resident of Franklin Farm. Raised my kids here, lived on Tuckaway Drive. I just wanted to highlight two things. I think most of them have been talked about in general, but one of the things that makes Franklin Farm so great is its location and its open space. And so I really just kind of want to direct my comments so that people kind of understand that. So in terms of the location, we're a huge neighborhood. We've got, West Ox or Lawyers, whatever you want to call it, on the east side. We run the Parkway kind of through the middle, and then we've got Centerville Road. So lots of access points. But in the time that I've lived here, we've seen those access points become choke points from a traffic perspective. One of the most concerning ones is at the corner of the Fairfax County Parkway and Franklin Farm Road. I live close enough where I can walk to the grocery store, which is a great convenience. I will tell you, in the last 6 months, there's people that are trying to beat the lights, they're trying to make the turns, and it's a very dangerous intersection for people on foot or bikes. It's something that I've wanted to bring forward for a while. I think this is a good opportunity to kind of highlight that. I heard earlier in the call that is an area that you have identified, but there is no plan to take any kind of action to remediate that. And it really does need to be looked at. It's extremely irresponsible to try and put in more folks there without having a plan. I don't know if it's a walkway for pedestrians, but part of this plan is that people can walk to the grocery store. That's a very dangerous intersection. There's been some car accidents there. And I can tell you, I personally myself have almost been hit a couple of times just walking for people that are trying to make those turns. So that's one thing I wanted to say. When I first moved here, or shortly after I moved here, since I live on Tuckaway, that was a primary cut-through street because it also comes off of the Parkway, and people are trying to cut through to try and get to Reston Parkway, Lawyers Road, West Ox, whatever you want to call it, because it changes names multiple times on that side, on the east side. So we just get a lot of extra traffic in here, and I do think it's something that needs to be considered. The other thing I want to say is I want to talk about the open space. That is one of our crown jewels of this neighborhood. We have lots of open space. It's been planned that way. We've taken care of it. You just heard Franklin Farm just talked about that. Many people talked about that. This particular project will deplete that open space, which is one of the beauties of this neighborhood. It's good for everybody. It's not going to necessarily be an eyesore. And I think it's a shame if, people are going to go ahead and take away that open space and trying to put this housing. I can't even imagine. I've walked by that spot many, many times. I walked by it again the other day to try and understand how they can even put any apartments or any kind of housing in there, especially as after you've outlined it this morning with multiple pipelines, water lines, drainage, et cetera, and trees that need to come out. So I just want to go on the record that for those reasons, I do not support this. And I hope that this will be not moving forward. Thank you.
Kristen?
Hi, everybody. Thanks for sticking around. I think I'm one of the last people, but I really just want to understand the difference between affordable living and low income. I think we've discussed it, but I'd like to know a clear, concise definition.
The definition is based on a federal designation of the area median income. As one of the speakers earlier tonight said that the area median income is around 150,000 per year.
And the other one is 93. But is that affordable living or is that low income?
No, that's affordable. I disputed the description of low income several times already.
Okay, so the next question that I have, and I'm trying to be quick, so I apologize. The next question I have is this affordable living or is this senior living? Because I also heard something about public servants and firefighters and teachers, but you have to be over 55. I believe that there are rules for retirement by the time you hit 55 in those types of professions.
Well, you could have affordable and senior in the same project without any difficulty.
Okay, but then that also then takes away from your argument about how there are families, right? This wouldn't be for families, this would be for seniors. And the reason that wouldn't be for families is because that makes things more difficult. But a lot of teachers, nurses, firefighters have families.
Well, but families don't live in an age-restricted community. You have to make a decision what project you're building.
Correct. So that's what I'm asking you. So what project are you building?
What I stated and what I will repeat is that you make a decision when you make your application if your project is an age-restricted community or not.
Okay,
If
so
it's not
you have not,
age-restricted, then families could live there. If it's
so you have not made that decision yet.
No,
even though you're amenable to 55 or up. Okay.
This is a very, very, very preliminary stage of this proposed project. So
it doesn't feel that preliminary because we are on a county government call right now. So that's the reason that everybody has so many questions and so many comments, because it doesn't feel preliminary. Now, that being said, I think that it was you earlier, Bob, who said that there was a bait, that they would never let a bait and switch go forward. However,
I think
that's
the county
great for
folks
us.
agreed.
That is wonderful for us because I do feel that there has been a lot of baiting and switching with this. Here's the plan, here are the pictures, here's the proposal. It's never going to affect anybody. We only have 8 days, but maybe everything will change because it's not really a plan. It's not really a proposal. So I want it to be known on the record that there has been so much baiting and switching, and Dr. Bob thinks that baiting and switching should not go forward, SSPA. So I think we really should honor his wishes and not push this forward. And on the last point that I have for tonight, I appreciate the 4 viewpoints in favor of this project tonight. Good for you guys. I would also like to point out that our petition now has over 2,000 signatures opposing the rezoning for this proposal. So thank you all. It's been a long night. This has been wildly informative. All of the bait and switch, all of the, no, I didn't say that. Yes, I did. I'm really glad that it's recorded. So thanks so much, guys. I appreciate your time.
Okay.
Hi, guys. I'm next. I'll be real fast. I just want to clarify something on timeline. Ruth did a good job about, going through the different contacts of when the church tried to contact the foundation. The first was on February 26th. The article in Fairfax Now was February 18th, over a week before the farm was contacted. So that action tells me that they're not interested in partnering with their 40-year neighbor. It's a trust issue with all of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Angie?
Hi, I'm Angie Camacho. I live on Autumn Hill Court, which is right around the corner from this proposal. I just want to share a really quick, a different perspective. We are a very young family. We have a 2-year-old son, and we're planning on potentially having more children. Our son goes to kindercare. We're battling the traffic every single day to get in and out of that parking lot safely. I walk my son to and from kindercare frequently. We have had a couple near misses with being hit by vehicles trying to even get into the kindercare parking lot. I honestly don't even walk to the shopping center across the street that frequently with my son because I have watched several people almost been hit by cars multiple times. We purchased in this neighborhood because of how much open space there was for kids to run around. We know that we will be impacted by increased traffic being so close to this proposed development. And I just want to bring up that perspective as someone that uses the kindercare facility every single day, that, I do not support this proposal. With this much high density in such a small area that's already impacted so greatly by traffic and safety for children in the community. Thank you. That's all.
Okay. Well, thank you, everyone for coming tonight. I'm glad we were able to stay later and get everyone's perspectives. So let me just put up our contact information again. Whoops. There we go. For all of us staff members who are here tonight, you can send more of your comments to us directly on any of the nominations and on the process. And I would encourage you to visit the Fairfax County website and the SSPA website to learn more about all of this, and even to sign up for that listserv, the county listserv, as I mentioned earlier, because then you will be getting emails about meetings like this one. So again, thank you all for coming.
Chairman, thank you and the staff at DPD for being with us tonight. Very much appreciate you taking the time. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you all for coming. Really appreciate it, especially for those of you that waited until 10:51 to be able to speak. We know it was all night, but really appreciate everybody's perspectives. And I think, as Aaron mentioned, we have recorded this meeting. It will be posted to YouTube in the coming days. We've been taking notes all along, so really appreciate your perspectives, and we will hopefully see some of y'all at the workshop on May the 1st. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.